Mr. Brimble. Welcome, John, representing Sport Otago.
Thank you, councillors. Before I commence, just to let you know that we support the sentiments expressed by Bill Chisholm. Can I introduce Owen Booth, who's our Sport Development Manager. Our submission's in two parts, as you're probably aware. A submission that relates to work we're currently undertaking on behalf of Council, and then there's the substantive submission on a range of issues. So addressing the first part, we've been engaged by Council through Parks and Recreation to carry out a substantive, groundbreaking project looking at sports fields and support facilities, their use, and how and what is carried out on those sports fields in any given year. And we're doing that as part of currently our service level agreement that we have with the Parks and Recs Department. What the first year has demonstrated to us is that both parties, in formulating the brief, it's been an evolving brief. The number of hours and the work involved certainly exceeds the sum allowed in that service level agreement. And if we're to progress this work to the extent that the benefit flows back to Council in a reasonable period of time, then we need to look at either front-loading the project and doing it over a shorter period, or increasing the available rate and again doing it over a shorter period, but probably over a 4 to 5 year period. And that would give Council a quicker return on that investment. The data that we are collecting and will collect feeds directly into the Council's proposed Parks and Recreation strategy. So the sooner that we can collect that information, feed it through to the department, the better able they will be to progress their overall Parks and Rec strategy. So the two are intertwined, they're both crucial. So really we've put two options to you: front load and get the project done in a year or so, or to contain it within a 4-year period, and there's a chart at the back of that submission which outlines the costs that represent that approach. In terms of our substantive submission, the second part, Bill's already talked about progressing the Logan Park development plan, so I won't elaborate on that. We would like to emphasise to Council and thank them for their contribution to the Dunedin City Skills to Swim program. It is the most successful Learn to Swim and water safety program in New Zealand. 59% of those students who have gone through the program, and that's 16,488 students to date over the 5 years, have achieved the New Zealand standard, as compared to a national standard of 23%. So that's a good news story for Dunedin. Your investment is making a significant difference. We are leading the country. So we'd encourage Council to continue to support the program in terms of the subsidy through entry to aquatic services and the direct investment into that program. It's a real investment in youth. The other point which Bill touched on, one of the things we've learned over the last couple of years with the work we've been doing with Council, with the major facilities review, and now the sports fields and amenities review, is the need for the Council to develop a facility strategy. So whether it's a dedicated home for football and futsal, further hockey development, aquatic facilities, tennis complexes, racket centres, or a gym sports centre, These are all projects that are in formulation at the moment. There's a crying need for an overall strategy and a process that allows council to then make reasoned decisions in terms of where they fit along a continuum. That would also give you the opportunity to also plan for what, if any, financial contribution you're prepared to make, and spread your risk over several years rather than trying to do things in too short a time frame. And I think we all know the impact of doing too much at the same time, and that certainly is a legacy that we're dealing with at the moment. On behalf of a number of sports, including the Otago Rugby Football Union, who's a major user of sports fields, along with Football South. Also, just a caution to council that when you're looking at fees for sports fields charges, that you take a reasonable view. Yes, you have to allow for inflation, but you also need to take account of sports' ability to pay increased costs. Invariably, that cost flows back to the individual because the sports have to pass it on. So all we're saying is, yes, we're conscious of the financial situation of council, but you just need to take a moderate view in terms of how you apply any increase. We'd also add our support to what Bill has said in regards to the economic development strategy, and just draw your attention to the fact that sport tourism does not feature in your plan whatsoever, and you only have to think back of the large number of events related to sport that have been attracted to the city and will continue to be attracted to the city that generate a huge economic return. Sport tourism is big business. It needs to be reflected in your overall economic strategy. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor McTavish.
Thank you, and thank you, John. Two questions. Firstly, I appreciate that when you guys first drafted this review project scope, you were probably doing so in the absence of knowing quite how much time it was going to take.
True.
Is it the case that there may be some aspects of that could be done at a higher level, or there may be some aspects of that wouldn't be considered perhaps as important in the first few years that could be pushed out in order to get us the critical data that we need to do a high-level strategy document, understanding that that will be refined as further information comes in those later years?
I will speak to answer.
Potentially, yes. We're in consultation with council staff on a regular basis around the project, so at the moment it is very fluid in terms of how we're approaching it. The current work that we're doing for the current financial year is based around 3 sports fields, them being Mornington Park, Tonga Park and Logan Park. Now Logan Park is obviously seen as a high priority area, so that's why it's in there. It's also one of the largest fields in terms of number of actual playing surfaces. So there's definitely scope for that sort of thing. I think we are at that point where we're doing that already to a certain extent, and we're happy for council to prioritise certain areas of the work as we go along.
Thank you. I think you've just covered the second one as well, so.
Councillor Lord.
Thank you, Worship. Yes, John, look, I've just got a question. You've just referred to something that I had not thought about before, sports tourism. I mean, obviously I understand people come to World Cups and that sort of thing. But can you just develop that theme a wee bit more if you think it's so important? I mean, I don't mean that it's not, but I'm just, yeah.
Well, you think back over the last year where we've had New Zealand Marching Championships here, apart from Super, is it 15 games? We have New Zealand Masters Games, we've had Special Olympics Games. They all generate a huge economic return to Dunedin and the greater Dunedin area. So the ability for us to market and promote Dunedin as a destination for people to come to, not just to view sport but to actually participate, generates a huge economic return to the retail and the entertainment sector. It has a huge spin-off benefit to the city.
Thank you.
Councillor Staines.
John, just looking at this and how we'd accelerate it, clearly as a council we have a pretty tight budget.
That's right.
And I was just looking at the hourly rate, which if you take that hourly rate to an annual salary, it's $130,000 a year. Admittedly, a portion of that would need to cover overheads associated with it, but is this work that needs to be done by a skilled specialist, or could it be done by a graduate in gathering the data who would work for an awful lot less than $62.70 an hour?
Like to say, you get what you pay for. It does require a knowledge, an understanding of sport and recreation. We've got a team of staff that Owen heads up that have been involved working in collaboration with council staff. A lot of it is taking council existing data, being able to understand, interpret and analyse it, rank it, order it and feed it back to council staff in a more usable form. It's also partly identifying the gaps and having staff with the expertise, which we do have, to go out and find that information, develop it. And probably Owen would be saying the other strength we bring is that we know our sports, they know us, we know the people to talk to, we know where to go to get the information. It's the relationships we have.
So in effect, you need a high-level person to do this work. It's not something that you could have a mix of a higher qualified person plus someone who's doing the donkey work.
Yeah, there's some elements. I mean, one of the things we're looking at the moment is casual use of sports fields, and how we actually go about measuring the casual use of these fields is something that we're still mulling over. We have not figured that out with council yet. And that's potentially something that we've talked about using graduates or students for, but also the hours that are associated with measuring casual use are quite significant as well. So there's elements of it, but the actual work that we're doing is quite detailed, it's quite time consuming. The rate that is in there is reflective of a partner rate within us, and I think, you know, if we were charging commercial rates it would be significantly higher, so it is a reduction in terms of what we would normally charge if it was we're working with a commercial group.
Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you. With regard to sports field charges, there are a number of submissions imploring us to improve the standards of some of our sports fields, and you're asking us essentially to try and peg them to the level of inflation. Do you accept that those can't both exist?
Well, it's a balancing act, we accept that. And in some cases, I think we have to accept that in order to get the improvements that people seek, there has to be expenditure, and that cost has to be recovered. And it may well be reflected in some increased charges. All we're asking is that when you look across the whole spectrum of sport, that a fair and reasonable approach is taken. I think everyone expects that there will be increases over time, and most organisations, given the opportunity, can adjust to that. It's where you have significant increases over a short period of time that really impacts on sport.
It does highlight the practicalities, I think, of some of the work that we're doing. The project that we worked on last year looked at actual sports fields and the maintenance, the actual dollar value spent on sports fields and their surrounding supporting facilities. The current work, the work that we're doing at the moment and into the future, is actually looking at the number of users of those fields. So you're going to be able to match up that user data with your maintenance data, and that's going to give you information as to how often a field or a park or a particular field on that park is being used. So you'll be able to make decisions as around to whether or not, you know, parks may be retired. Others may need to have spent more on them because they're more high use and they're in more populated areas. So that's the practical nature, I guess, of the work that we're doing.
Is it your opinion that the comprehensive parks and reserve strategy that you alluded to, and my understanding is that that's starting later this year, your suggestion is that that can't start until your project is finished, essentially?
I wouldn't say it can't start, but it would to have this information would definitely aid it, yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Kelp.
Is walking, toddler walking, dog walking a sport? As in use of parks?
It's an activity that takes place on parks and sports fields.
And are you tracking it at all?
In the scope.
Are you tracking that as casual
In the scope of this report, it wouldn't be picked up as users because the users that we pick up through the booking system, the DCC, so it's booked use. As we expand the casual use component, then potentially it will show up in casual use as to the number of people using it in that form.
So it's only picked up by charging, essentially.
The actual use of the field. Yeah, so the way that sports fields are used at the moment, or they're supposed to be used for the likes of football or for rugby or whatever, they're booked through the council for both the trainings and for games, so it goes through a booking system. For someone who's just walking their dog, that obviously doesn't happen.
Just.
Councillor White.
Thank you. Have you seen sport participation decline or increase in Dunedin over the last 10 years? And I'm referring to outdoor sport. I know the Edgar Centre's had a huge impact on indoor sport.
Overall, sport would have increased in participation numbers. We can track that through the Active New Zealand study and through the recently released Sport New Zealand Youth Survey. So overall numbers have increased. Within Dunedin, we've probably plateaued a wee bit in terms of growth in sports. It fluctuates between sports. There's been phenomenal growth in the likes of football and futsal in particular. Basketball's seen growth, but in other sports there's been a decline, so you've got to average it out.
I noticed when you say futsal and basketball, they're both indoor, and the Edgar Centre's had that impact. So do you see the quality, obviously the quality in the fields will have an impact, ideally?
We know from the intelligence that we've gathered in respect to what's happened in Auckland and Wellington in particular, with use of artificial fields, that participation has just skyrocketed because it's taken away the impact of weather. It means you can use it 24/7.
Has Clutha seen the same increase
With the creation of the Cross Recreation Centre, they've had a phenomenal growth in participation and the creation of a whole range of sports that have grown up now being able to utilise an indoor facility. And there were sports that previously either didn't exist or were very small in numbers. And again, it's just providing an incentive for them to grow. There's also been a flow-on increase in outdoor-based sports who have developed modified aspects of their game so that they've been able to take them indoors, and that's had a flow-on effect to increase the numbers playing their outdoor sport.
Okay. Is there any potential source of funding through Sport New Zealand to assist you with some of these, evaluating the fields and things like that?
No. But they have a very restricted number of pots of money. This was effectively an engagement through the council to carry out work on council amenities and sports fields.
Okay. And touching on finally this sport and tourism, I note with different events you talk about a lot of the bigger events and Masters Games, etc. I consistently see whenever there's a secondary schools competition in Dunedin. I know Cadbury's do very well when there's netball tournaments in town and things like that. And I know even our golf club does quite nicely out of parents coming. Is there a way for us to capture or be more on the marketplace for that and get more of those events coming to the city?
Yeah, I think there's a huge potential for those medium-sized and I'll call them regional events. Again, it's promoting and marketing them. There's a lot of those medium-sized tournaments and events that circuit New Zealand on a regular basis. So it's a matter about the individual sports working with council, working with ourselves to put in a bid to attract them here.
I mean, those events are largely run by the RSO, the Regional Sports Organisation.
Can I take it then that your research and analysis could provide information about the financial advantages of artificial turfs as referred to by Mr Chisholm?
Yes.
In terms of what the savings might be on the grounds that they're replacing?
Well, the work that Owen's team's doing will identify where potential savings are in terms of existing sports fields, and then you factor in the impact that an artificial surface could have on that.
Right. Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you very much for your submission. Mr. Wyber. Welcome.
Your Worship and Councillors, thank you for reading my submission. And I hope you can excuse my voice, which is deteriorating. It's a function of increasing age and life in the private sector for the past 16 years. I'm not going to go through my submission. I hope you've all read it, but just to summarise, I've submitted on 3 interrelated themes. The first is performance standards that are meaningful as well as measurable. The second is the spatial plan correctly identified that more intensive residential development should occur close to the suburban centres. The department's own research supported that, but that's not what came out for so-called public consultation. And the third item was council's website not being layperson user-friendly. On that last one, I attended the draft annual plan meeting in the art gallery on 7th of April. I have the consulate Dunedin, the council's currently consulting on my desktop as a shortcut, so I can refer directly to it without having to go on a fishing expedition through the maze every day I want to look at it. And what it said the day after the meeting, while the consultations were still on, there are no current consultations, and that relates to the draft annual plan. I did the same search today. This meeting doesn't exist because it says current consultations, hearing details. There are no scheduled consultation hearings. And relative to my submission on sorting the website out and putting out a user's guide, the ORC have done one. I had a look at it last night, and I could actually find my way into it, following the instructions. Now, that's all I've got to say.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Vandens.
You have a long history of knowing how council works from the inside, and now some number of years looking at things from the outside. The council website not being user-friendly for lay persons, is this something that you have noticed actually has improved to some extent, at least over recent years, or do you think it's been a long-term and systemic problem?
Can't answer that. The one item I've used regularly over the years is the rates information database. I can't remember if there's been any changes or not, but it actually needs a major refresh. Most of us have got small screen and elderly computers. A lot of us who are getting on can't use them very well. It should be reviewed. My argument is it should be reviewed in terms of how the majority of the citizens here who might want to use it, what sort of equipment they've got, and how it presents on their sort of equipment.
Okay, yeah, point well taken.
Now, to add to that, I've only started to use the website and try and find documents since what passed as public consultation, which wasn't for the district plan review, came out. As I've listed in my submission, links were broken, documents documents just weren't there, and I was only looking for the residential zoning information. I have no idea which other links are broken, both the planning department and all the other departments. It just doesn't, to me as a user, it just isn't being maintained.
Thank you very much for giving us that feedback. One other thing, have you tried finding, for instance, a minute or an agenda of a meeting going back a few months?
Yeah, hopeless. Absolutely hopeless.
It's certainly really quite difficult, isn't it? I know I have similar.
No, I give up. Doesn't work for me.
Thank you very much for that. We have been trying to do something about it for some time. I've been aware of the problem and certainly talked to staff about it. Hopefully we will be able to do something about it in the near future. Thank you for your submission.
Councillor Hawkins.
Mr. Wyber, I'm interested in your performance measure for council of 1 4-lease sign per block. I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with you that there are far too many in our shop windows and are far better with shops in them than political signage. What do you see the DCC's role, though? If that's a measure of our performance, what can we do over other factors, say commercial property owners being unrealistic about the market rates they can attract?
The point I'm trying to raise is vacancy is a direct relationship to zoning in the district plan. Overzoned commercial in a static growth situation like Dunedin, and there's vacant premises all over the place. To have reasonably full occupancy in the main retail areas, there needs to be a bit of zoning pressure, i.e. underzoned, not overzoned.
So you're suggesting that we shrink the area currently zoned commercial?
What I'm saying is, I was in retail for a few of the recent years. If you overzone and let retail activities go out of zone, there's an implication back in the core area. In a growth situation like Auckland, it doesn't matter. In big cities, it doesn't matter. You make a mistake, overzone, the growth is caught up with it all in a year or two. In Dunedin, the legacy lasts for decades.
Thanks.
Councillor Thompson.
Well, in the spirit of Councillor Vandervis's questioning technique, I just point out in slight defence that if you go to the annual plan section, you will find that this meeting does exist, that we're at it, and that submissions for it have closed, which is technically correct. So it is there. It may be that there are easier ways of finding it.
If I may respond to that, my point is I'm a layperson these days.
I take your point entirely. I'm just saying it is there.
I use the shortcut on the desktop, and in that I would actually expect to find what's going on, and it just isn't there.
No more questions? Thank you, Mr. Wyber, for your submission.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. Ms. Szulzicki. Yep. Jennifer Szulzicki. Right. Mr. Dowd.
Yes.
Just for the record, before you start, I've gone slightly out of order, and so Mr. Jennings is the next one. I've just got the round line, so we'll take Mr. Dowden first. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship and councillors. I will act on the assumption that you've all read the submission and looked at the reprinted Otago Daily Times news story about the elderly gentleman who fell over trying to cross the Ross Creek and spent some time in icy cold water. Now, he was very lucky that there happened to be passers-by who helped him out of the water, and he was also lucky that the rescue emergency services were able to get there fairly quickly and drag him out. For those not familiar, there's a network of tracks in the Ross Creek Reserve, and there's a missing link where there's no bridge over the Ross Creek. About 3 tracks meet there from one side, and 1 track in 2 directions meets at the other side, but you can't get across without wading or tightrope walking across a couple of pipelines, none of which are particularly ideal. Are there any questions?
Councillor Wilson.
For fear that I misinterpret what your recommendation might be, and that may also be misinterpreted by the staff. The staff's comment was, with regards to people using the pipe to cross the creek, we will have to ensure that measures are put in place to prevent this as soon as possible. Is that actually what you're asking for, or are you asking that we have a better bridge system? Because, the reason I ask this is because I'm very aware that Jared Harlan came years ago saying he wanted improvements to the tunnels, and what we did was shut the tunnels off, and that wasn't actually what he wanted at all, and I wanted some clarity about what you want here.
I think you should congratulate your staff for their showing immediate concern for the health and safety of people crossing the pipelines, but no, I want a bridge.
You want a bridge, but equally if we can't, and they also note that we can't do a bridge immediately, would what you're actually asking for is to make the pipelines able to be crossed safely, or do you actually think that they need to be closed? Because closing them will have some fairly dramatic effects from the use if we can't put a bridge there immediately.
I tell you what, I wouldn't cross the pipeline myself, and I'm just over half the age of the guy who did. Yeah. They're scary, actually.
Yeah.
But no, my submission didn't mention the pipelines as such. I don't want to express an opinion on whether or not they should be closed, fenced off, etc. I'd rather just not go there. I don't think crossing the river itself is particularly easy or safe anyway. It's got slippery rocks and very cold water. Okay. And as you can imagine, if that bloke had knocked himself out and ended up face down in the water, well, it would have been a bigger article in the paper.
Yep, no, thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor McTavish.
Thanks, Peter, for your submission. Do you, I mean, there are some people who would pay money, like I do it quite regularly, to go tramping in the hills to do natural stream crossings, and the fact that I can go and do that up the creek from my home is even better, because it means I don't have to. Do you recognise that for some people having the opportunity to still go and walk in relatively unmodified tracks is of value?
In fact, they would not have to go so far. They could walk down to the Water of Leith where it passes through North Dunedin and simply ignore the bridges that have been laid on for their benefit. They could simply, go and splash around in the water if they want. They could walk down to the harbour basin and jump into the harbour too. A bridge certainly doesn't prevent anybody walking across the stream getting their feet wet.
Councillor Vance.
Thank you very much for your submission. I was particularly taken by your Waipori comments and wondering whether you would like to expand on your ethical investment comments with relation to Golden Heights and Crimea. Yes, thank you for reminding me that I'd written that. But yes, I was invited by the submission form to comment on an ethical investment policy, and so yes, I thought not investing in countries that had been taken over by force by other countries, so that would include Crimea, the Palestinian territories, including the Golan Heights, West Bank and Gaza Strip. Yeah, why not? Would you add some of the African takeovers and abominations?
I'm not actually an expert in international geopolitical investment strategies, but I'm sure if I spent a bit more time, I could probably come up with half a dozen places I'd rather the DCC didn't invest.
Okay, so just to confirm, you're quite serious about ethical investments in these areas?
Yes, I absolutely applaud any approach made by the councillors to encourage ethical investment by the council, yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Dowden, thank you very much for your submission. Now, Mr. Jennings.
This isn't in
This has been
order.
popped in and it won't be on your sheet.
No.
It is on mine, and then I go around the
What
wrong.
number is it?
It is page 951. So, yes. It's in the second to be read, to be heard folder. I think it might, Wendy says it's the last one on the back. Not quite.
I think 3:50 it was originally scheduled for, 3:50 p.m. on Friday.
Oh, right, yep.
Yeah.
But in terms of finding it,
Oh,
right. Here we go, page 951 in the second to be heard folder. The floor is yours, Mr. Jennings.
right. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for letting me speak today. There was no way I could make it on Friday, and I very much wanted to be able to present, so thank you. As you're finding it now, I'm Phil Motaga Southland, and we've been in a partnership with DCC for 7 years now, and I'm seeking continuing support. I'm conscious of the financial pressures under the council, and I just would like to point out that we are an economic driver for the town. Our return on investment of the 20,000 last year was 74-1, new business brought into the region. This doesn't count tailor-made or NHNZ. This is just production that's brought in. And we're quite active in developing talent in the community and trying to nurture the next generation of filmmakers. The rest, I think, is probably in there. Yeah.
So questions, councillors? Councillor Banks.
If we decide not to continue with the $20,000 funding, what do you think the direct effects would be?
I would have to take that back to, I'm governed by a trust board, so obviously not good. We count on the investment from our partners outside of QLDC, pays for most of it. They're $84,000 a year, and they house me and accommodate me and provide support. So I would have to take that to my trust board and see what we do.
But in terms of your overall budget, even a relatively small amount like $20,000 is actually fairly substantial for you.
Yeah, yes, very much. So our annual budget is $134K, so it is substantial, yeah.
Thank you.
And very much appreciated.
Following on from Councillor Bannister's question, if Dunedin City didn't help fund you, would that mean that you would pull back your promotional efforts geographically to the areas that do fund you?
I would have to consult with my trust board to see what they directed, and with the other funders who are funding to see how they felt about that. So I can't really say.
But it's not an unreasonable conclusion to draw.
No, I would think that the people who are funding would possibly think that they would want me to focus on that area. The reality is, for me, is having Dunedin as part of our ecosystem is extremely valuable, and it ups our overall offering and might quite possibly land a job that wouldn't normally come here. So it is very important for us to have you here.
Sure. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you. Mine's a similar question again, and it's more along the lines of, isn't that happening already? I applaud the regional approach, but I note that in recent years there's been a number of feature film productions in Southland. There's a lot of activity in QLDC. It's relatively poor in the Dunedin region, and as far as that argument of economic benefit and multiplier effects and what have you, are we actually getting what we're paying for presently?
Well, I mean, I would look to, it shows that new business that came in the last financial year was 1.4 million. And it's hard to say how much of that would not have come here if we weren't tied into the network that we are.
what is, for the same amount Venture Southland put in the same as the DCC, what has the effect been on that region for that same investment?
I don't have that in this report. More. They have had more, and specifically with the feature films that have come through. As far as activity, I don't have the financial, I haven't broken out the fund. The DCC is the only place that asks for a financial return breakdown, so you're the only ones I actually do that for.
Well, thank you. Apart from the funding side of things, what is there that you suggest, or Film Otago Southland suggests, that we can do outside of funding to help improve our relative return on the investment that we're making? I mean, there has to be more to it than a $20,000 check.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the differences in Southland is they've actually been able to fund projects. They've got some funding that has gone to directly fund feature films that has been the difference in making those go there. And that's not for me to ask for here, but that would be specific projects, and they're fortunate to have some funding available for that. So outside of that, the community, the film community that's here, and it's important to probably clarify, there's TaylorMade and NHNZ and Arrow, they sort of operate on their own, and they're mostly looking offshore. I'm talking about sort of new production that's happening here, so just so we're clear on that. I'm in the process now of getting updated image library from one of the location scouts here, and what we can do is just continually keep putting ourselves out there, and what I try to do is connect industry that's here with industry elsewhere to help them. I connect them, and hopefully they can put deals together. And we've got, there's a television project possibly happening here. There's a feature film that we've developed in Otago with a Dunedin-based producer. So all of these things, even if they might not shoot in Dunedin, they're building the capability of the industry people that are living here. So it's sort of a holistic approach to trying to get more happening, get the pie bigger for Otago Southland, and that Dunedin gets a slice of that pie.
Councillor McTavish.
Yeah, thank you. Two questions. Firstly, the Writers in Residence program, where is that based? How do you decide what part of the region that operates out of?
That could be anywhere,
right.
And it would love to have one in Dunedin. The first one that we had, which is actually the one partnered with a producer who's Dunedin based, was a lady from Auckland, and it was set on a high country sheep station. So I found our high country sheep station in Glenarchy. But that is, like, if we could find somebody that has a story that wants to be in Dunedin, I'd very much like to place them here. So that can be anywhere.
Great. The second question, you mentioned Film Dunedin here.
Yep.
Can you refresh my memory as to how that relates to you guys and how that relates to us?
Yep.
What's the triangle there?
Yeah. Ross Gray is over there, who is Film Dunedin. He's in the Economic Development Division of DCC. So he looks after, if a specific project comes here and interfaces with the council, they go to Ross. And we've introduced a permitting system to try to help track things. And in the last year, this is 2 years ago, so in the last year they would go to Ross and get the permits, and last year the permits raised, I think, $1,750, which helps get a bit back of what we do.
Yeah. No, sorry, I just hadn't realised that we'd named Ross Film Dunedin.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Questions? Thank you very much for your submission.
Thank you.
Mr. Entwistle. Welcome, Peter.
I hope everyone can hear me. I've got a slight head cold today. Your Worship, councillors, thank you for the opportunity to speak. You will have seen from the submission I have already sent that with regard to heritage funding, I support option 3. With regard to Portobello Road and Harrington Point Road improvements, I support option A. Regarding the Waipori Fund and ethical investing, I suggest formalising the exclusion of direct investment in armaments. Returning to heritage funding, I appreciate the Council is very constrained financially, but the present programme is producing excellent results and the proposed additional expenditure is not large. The preservation, maintenance and where possible the enhancement of our heritage building stock is of great significance for this city and has long presented both problems and opportunities. Sometimes it has seemed that the problems were getting the better of the opportunities. Recently, however, and while this programme has been in place, there has been a distinct uptick in successes. The refurbishment and reuse of the former Standard Insurance building, the former Bank of New Zealand building, both in Princess Street, the Bing Harris warehouse and the Clarion building, and in the warehouse precinct, the former Donald Reed Wool store, now AD Instruments, the former NMA head office and the former John Mackinlow Limited complex are only some of a much longer list of examples, to which now may be added the former Chief Post Office, which are signs of a blossoming heritage spring for Dunedin. Of course, the Council and its programmes are not the only agents of this welcome development. There are many owners, designers and contractors who have been crucial in bringing it about. But the Council's programme is definitely helping, hence my recommendation. I would also like to mention the formidable energy and efforts of the Council's Heritage Planner, Dr. Glenn Hazelton. I'm well aware there are many Council officers who routinely go beyond the call of duty in carrying out the Council's work. I deplore the two routinely heard public utterances denigrating the Council's staff as a whole. But I have personal experience of Dr. Hazelton's almost unbelievable working hours and the intelligence, judgment and zeal he brings to his work. I would like my commendation to be a matter of public record, and thus I'm taking the opportunity, this opportunity, to make it one. Thank you.
Good questions, councillors. Councillor McTavish.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you very much, Peter. The question that I have is about the split that we have between a generic heritage fund and place-based or targeted fund, which we change every year. Do you have a view on the relative merits of both and or one? And are you comfortable with the current or the proposed split between those two?
Yes, I am comfortable with that. I don't know enough about the details of how it all works, but I'm aware that people like Dr. Hazelton feel comfortable with it, or at least I understand that to be so. And with his much closer understanding of how it works and where the pressures and the effects are coming from, I would support that.
Thank you. Councillor Benson-Papa.
Thank you, Bishop. Thank you, Mr. Entwistle, for your submission and equally for your tireless advocacy of heritage issues over a very long period, including the very appropriate, if embarrassing, comments about Dr. Hazelton. I don't want to ask about that though, because I agree with you, I think we are making progress, but I'm interested in your comment about ethical investment. Are you restricting yourself to armaments, or would you also include other topical, contentious areas such as tobacco and so on?
I restricted myself to armaments. I'd be a hypocrite if I included tobacco because I'm a smoker. I have real concern about the idea of the funds being invested in a company that was, directly involved in some sort of genocidal activity in darkest Asia or Africa or anywhere. But it can be difficult to, I think, to put it in place successfully, you'd have to keep emphasising that these were going to be banned where they were direct. But you'd probably be leaving the door wide open to how, arms smugglers and death dealers work, to avoid the money being used indirectly, because that's how those people work. So I decided I'd just put that in the too hard basket.
Thank you.
Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, and thanks, Peter. And as you rightly point out, it's not just council who's responsible for this heritage spring, so-called. A lot of very progressive building owners have come a long way in helping us achieve that. I wonder if you had any thoughts about what we could do for building owners, perhaps who aren't on the same page as us, particularly owners of heritage building stock, and you know, the degradation of those and the broader effects that has on amenity value and what have you.
I'm aware that Dr. Hazelton spends a phenomenal amount of time talking to people who own buildings and are thinking of making changes to them. And it would be fair to say that among them there are some who are not particularly aware or very friendly towards, you know, their heritage buildings. And unless you're going to employ an army of Dr. Hazeltons, I don't know what more you can do really, but he's only been on the staff a relatively few years, and before that there weren't people with his specific expertise to take up that particular work. But there's certainly a tremendous amount of it, and I think that that's an area where the council is performing well already. Though, of course, if you want to employ more, feel free to do so. I'll support it.
Any further questions? Mr. Edwhistle, thank you very much for your submission.
Thank you.
Now, councillors, the next submission on there, Mr. Cummings, has been crossed off. I don't know where he does. So, it is now lunchtime.
Economic development must also work hand in hand with business development, which is driven by the private sector. With proper economic development planning, we are able to provide an environment that leads to the development of our local business community. The Chamber has recommended that Council continues to direct its funding of economic development into the initiatives outlined in the strategy. We'd also like to just note the good work done by the CEO and her team to reduce the projected rates rise to less than 3%. We support Council in its prioritisation of reducing debt. Not surprisingly, we support the acceleration of the rating differential reduction for non-residential ratepayers. You can speed that up as much as you like, Grant. Thank you. The Chamber does remain concerned, though, about the potential impact for Dunedin of the government's proposed legislation on earthquake-prone buildings. We are supportive of Council's submission to Government on this and ask Council to consider a joint working party with the Chamber to identify and assess the issues that this will present for our city and its residents. Chamber has formed an Energy Committee with the intent of working alongside Council as it establishes an energy plan. We have a series of recommendations from this committee already, which are contained in our submission, and we request here that Council, 1, maintain adequate resourcing and staffing to ensure the energy plan is developed and formalised by December 2014 at the latest, including an adequate consultation period. 2, ensure that the energy plan supports and enriches other plans and strategies, such as the economic development strategy, the transportation strategy, and the social wellbeing strategy. 3, ensure that the energy plan supports Dunedin's growing renewable generation activity and cosy homes activity. 4, look for ways in which the energy plan can be more securely locked in place in the next long-term plan. And 5, renew the Warm Dunedin Target rate tool and expand it to include solar photovoltaic installations at LTP time, if not before. As you can see, they're off to a good start, that committee. We're supportive of Council and the direction it is taking with the City Marketing Agency. The Chamber obviously has an interest in the direction this new agency will take, and we'll look closely to work with it.
Our Tourism Committee would also make the suggestion that it would be an appropriate time to review the city tourism and visitor strategy. The Chamber notes its interest in any ongoing discussions relating to the proposed cycleways. This is an issue that our members have expressed a lot of interest in. In our written submission, we have indicated that we would work to support Council in undertaking a central city revitalisation plan and to look at options for use of the Octagon in particular and other public spaces. The Chamber would be willing to work with Council on this on an ongoing basis. In conclusion, the Chamber values the relationship it has with Council, and we remain committed to working with you towards improving our local economic and employment environment. Must have been in a really happy place when I wrote that submission. That concludes.
Which we are very grateful. Thank you very much, Mr. Christie. Councillor Benson-Pope.
Thank you, John. Just in terms of that last item that you mentioned, Central City revitalisation, have you got any specific ideas that you focus on? I know you talk about some general procedural things and making better use of the Octagon to the railway station type area, but what do you mean? Are there any flesh on that, on the bones of that phrase, is what I'm asking?
Yeah, look, both our retail and our tourism committees have mooted some ideas around better use of those spaces, particularly when cruise season's upon us and when we have events. We think that that's something we'd like to engage with Council and the local businesses in those areas, to undertake a consultation with them to ensure that we're going to be doing things that are of interest to them and of benefit to them, but also provides a better amenity for the city. So we've got ideas, but...
so you're talking about design issues and such like, and not just the nuts and bolts of mechanics?
Yep, some design issues, and I would encourage Council to be thinking about how we can better use those spaces, knowing that you have long-term plans for improving some of those amenities anyway. So it's a matter of getting that planning and consultation in early.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you. Thanks, John. Thanks for the submission, and I'm very excited by the Chamber and their enthusiasm for getting stuck into particularly the city's energy plan as it's developed. So thanks for that. You say that the Chamber in its submission says the support for the energy plan should be linked to other council strategies, economic development, transport and social wellbeing. Is that an order of importance?
I don't believe so. That did come from our committee, and I would think that they would see all of those strategies of equal importance.
Cool. The support for continuing and expanding the scope of the Warm Dunedin scheme, has there been any conversations within the organisation around expanding that out or creating a parallel equivalent of that, perhaps aimed at commercial buildings and businesses, so that businesses can take advantage of those sorts of energy efficiencies also?
I would think that would be something we'd be really keen to see incorporated into the energy strategy.
Tying support of heritage funding to energy efficiency in buildings. Similar, I guess, to Councillor Benson-Pope's question, is it more advanced than that as to what that would look like, and is it the intention that it would be the building owner that would, because that potentially could carry substantially higher costs in doing that short term, that would be carried by the council funding element, or would that burden be carried by the commercial owner, or is it not that advanced?
Look, I guess personal view is I saw some of the models that have worked elsewhere around the world, including Portland, Oregon, and a lot of their incentivisation by local authorities was tagged to certain outcomes that met environmental standards. So there was a contractual relationship entered into between the developer and the city authority before they got funding, and I think some of those models are worthy of further investigation, and I think provide a better outcome for the community in the long run, and would probably get the buy-in from the developers.
Great. And just lastly, on the Central City revitalisation work, does the Chamber support a conversation around the pedestrianisation of the lower Octagon and or parts of Lower Stewart Street?
That's certainly one area that we've been debating whether or not that could be trialled, and certainly trialled at parts of the day
when we know there's increased activity where that could be well utilised. So yes, that would certainly be something we would want to consult with those businesses about further.
Great. Thanks, John.
Councillor Vanders.
Thank you, John. Regarding the commercial rates differential reduction, which you are keen on and have been for a while, have you promoted an increase in the glacial speed of that by looking at models elsewhere in New Zealand? Do you know of anywhere else that has bigger commercial rates differential than we have, for instance?
That's a good question. I think we're not the worst, but I don't think we're the best when it comes to the differentials. They're really confusing. It's hard to compare apples with apples around rating differentials. They can be, where they're applied well, a very useful tool, but often as the case, they can become just an unfair rating differential on a particular sector group. And I think what's been signalled by Council here is that you've recognised that and you're prepared to adjust that back to a more acceptable level. Without wanting to go into a whole debate about how rates are collected and who are the beneficiaries of those, I think targeted rates and rating differentials have their place. And really, as I say, it is quite hard to compare that across councils. We accept that you're reducing it. We certainly accept the acceleration on that. If you could get there tomorrow, we would be happier. But we do realise it has an impact on other parts of the community as a result.
Okay. Regarding proposed cycleways, you said that your members have expressed a lot of interest in that. A number of your members have expressed to me a lot more than interest, but in fact quite violent disapproval, especially regarding the loss of parking.
Yes.
I'm wondering why the Chamber of Commerce hasn't really relayed a lot of what seems to be a very strong member opinion.
There's two very strong schools of thought on that. One is very anti, and there is also a very pro group. In the absence of a structured plan as to what was actually going to happen, we had very little to be able to comment on. At the moment, there is a lot of investigation into possible strategies around that, and as that becomes more refined, we will be soliciting views from those businesses, but it's a bit hard to comment, for us to comment too much on it until those final details are known. So the actual loss of parks, the actual proposed cycleways, when we know that impact and we've had an opportunity to consult with those business owners, we'll be in a better position to be able to feed that back to council.
Thank you.
Councillor Noon.
Thank you, Worship. John, don't take this question the wrong way, but can you indicate to me the number of businesses that are members of the Chamber, and if I give a defined area, and it relates to a number of the topics that you talk about on behalf of the Chamber. If you took the area from, let's say, the Oval through to Frederick Street, and obviously including Princess George and Maury Place, what number of the businesses in that proximity would be members of the Chamber, approximately?
Cheapest, good question.
Happy for you to have a think about it and pass it back to us, but...
Look, I can give you a breakdown on that. We've got roughly 1,100 members across the region. Most of them are domiciled in Dunedin. It's hard to be definitive on that because some businesses have multiple entities that have their own legal structures. So we're aware that we don't represent all businesses directly through paid subscriptions, but we do have, in the case of retailers, for example, we have a lot of non-members that we still have access to by way of surveys, attendance at events and things that we run that does give us their opinions, even though they're not fully paid up members. But I'd like to think that what we do know is of those members we have, there are approximately 25,000 there's about 25,000 employees represented by those members, to give you an estimate. So a quarter of Dunedin's population. Councillor McTavish.
Yeah, look, I was just seeking clarity around the cycleways as well. You term it in general terms, but I imagine that you're fairly specifically referring to the cycleways along the one-way system.
Yes.
Or does that expand to interest in, for example, the safety improvements out along the Portobello Harrington Point Road, or the one out to Port Chalmers? Or
we are interested in those as well from a tourism perspective, but
yeah, main thrust of our focus on this is the one-way system.
Thank you.
Councillor White.
Thank you. John, the Chamber had a great publication they put out to, focusing on business in Dunedin. Where is that at and what's happening and when's the next one coming out?
Yep. We produced 4 copies of Otago each in the last 12-15 months, and it's a great publication. We had some real fun doing that. Learned a lot of really important lessons along the way, and I think we got to the point where we had a really good business model for that. Unfortunately, we didn't have enough financial support for me to continue to recommend to our board that we sustain that indefinitely. So at the moment we've got it on pause, purely because you cannot produce something to that quality for that number of issues a year without significant underwriting, which we just don't have. It costs the Chamber a lot of money.
Councillor Lord.
Yeah, thanks John for the submission, but I've just got a question in regards to the reduction in the commercial rate. I just wonder if that would also be the Chamber's view that the use of not just targeted rates but UAGCs, and perhaps a lift in the community services rate would also serve to be a fairer system. Yeah, look, definitely. I think you know, specific targeted rating is a really, really good tool, and most of you will be familiar with how that can be applied. You know, it ring fences certain projects, and it gets rid of that intergenerational equity issue. So I think they can be really well applied, and you know, generally businesses would be supportive of that, as long as they are used for the purposes that they've been set out, which is where targeted rates have enormous value. Yeah.
Questions? Thank you, John, for your submission. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Alan Marr. Welcome, Alan.
Thank you, Your Worship. Your Worship and Councillors, thank you for the opportunity of speaking briefly to my submission, which was prompted by the publication of a so-called issues paper by the Royal Society of New Zealand earlier this year, referred to as the Facing the Future Towards a Green Economy in New Zealand. I appended this document to my submission, and as a fellow of the Royal Society myself and a Dunedin ratepayer for more than 50 years, I commend this document to the Dunedin City Council. It was prepared for the benefit of central and local governments and the public at large, and it has much in it, I think, of relevance to the Council. Climate change has been getting much publicity lately, and I'd just like to emphasise that it's not just an environmental issue, climate change. It's been emphasised right across the board. The British Royal Society of London and the American Academy of Science published jointly late last year on similar topics. We emphasise that this environment, climate change, is a broad systemic threat to public health, as well as to the systems generally, economic systems, national security, and the world's natural ecological systems on which we all depend in terms of their services. I particularly commend the summary and the conclusions in this document. It's a short document, jointly written by several prominent New Zealand scientists, including the convener, Professor Carrington from Otago University Physics Department, and Professor Jane Stevenson from the Centre for Sustainability. I'd just like to read you one short paragraph. This is on page 4, and I'm not sure you have the document, I hope you do. Second column, the Ministry for the Environment acknowledges New Zealand must adapt to changes in climate and contribute to coordinated international action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere. The government has set several targets for reducing national net greenhouse gas emissions compared with gross emissions in 1990. including an unconditional 5% reduction by 2020 and a 50% reduction by 2050. However, recent modelling by the Ministry for the Environment indicates that by 2040, New Zealand's net GHG emissions are expected to be 51% higher than the 1990 baseline. This represents an average growth rate of 0.8% per annum. So we're really failing in our commitment the government has set to reach even those targets, and they're considered by world standards pretty marginal. So the document, I think, is extremely relevant. I know Council is doing quite a bit in terms of adjusting, responding to this issue. I'd just like to refer to several documents, and one here I have I'd like to add to my earlier papers. It's just recently published this week by the New Zealand Climate Change Centre, published by the New Zealand representative on the International Panel of Climate Change. It talks about the New Zealand situation, and it presents a fairly serious picture for the country. There are challenges there, there are opportunities there. And I'd like to suggest that one of the opportunities is certainly not further exploration of oil and gas offshore. I was very concerned to see, and I've added to my submission here, the clipping in their Target Daily Times, 8 oil and gas probes scheduled in the next few years. I commend the several papers on carbon trackers which talk about unburnable carbon, wasted capital and stranded assets. I've researched this myself in terms of my presentations around the country, and I've given you one page from a PowerPoint presentation in this other document where it's been calculated that 80% of the potential carbon resources, known resources, 80% are in fact considered unburnable. Unburnable if in fact we are to keep atmospheric temperature rise within 2 degrees Celsius, which was agreed as the critical threshold at the Copenhagen Climate Change Conference 2 years ago. So we have a challenge, and I believe the challenge can be met, and I commend to you an organisation called Awatea. I've added some papers on it here. Awatea is the Aotearoa Wave and Tidal Energy Association. This is a group which has been set up within the last 5 years to promoting a marine energy industry, recognising the value of marine energy. There's quite a lot of work being done in Cook Strait, Tory Channel, Kaipara Estuary. These areas are known to have substantial resources of tidal energy, strategically placed, absolutely predictable in terms of when it's available and when it's not. There are resource consents already issued for research into Cook Strait, but unfortunately no governments or major energy companies seem willing to support it. So I believe that's an opportunity, it's a challenge for the future to divert some of our attention away from fossil carbon and greenhouse gas production and look at some of our many sustainable energy resources which New Zealand is recognised to have in plentiful amount. And I commend you in particular Awatea, which is having its annual conference just in the next week and is further promoting but lacks the funding required to further promote the implementation of this resource which New Zealand has probably more favourably than most countries in the world. So they're my messages to you, Councillor, Mr Mayor, and I emphasise to you that we have now carbon resources available way beyond our reasonable ability to combust them. We will do so at the peril of particularly future generations, and this council I would hope would have the future generations' values and concerns at their heart in developing and implementing their annual plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor? Councillor McChapman.
Thank you, Alan, and congratulations on your recent acknowledgement by the University of the work that you've done over the years. Alan, I really valued this paper, and in particular the part of the summary on implementing change which spoke about the value of clusters and the fact that we've got strong research collaborations to support green innovation. And I wondered, given your experience working with the university in Dunedin, what you thought that we as a council could be doing to support the existing clusters that already exist within the university working in this area, and or leverage off them to inform our own work as a council.
Well, I'm impressed council is doing quite a bit to promote a green economy, a green future. Its promotion of cycleways, I think, is a very important initiative. I see the council is likely to take over the responsibility of public transport in Dunedin. That, I think, would be a challenge for the city to improve public transport to the point where we become less reliant on private vehicles, because we know that a high proportion of carbon emissions in this country come from private vehicles. The university has been collaborating with people around the city. My Wise Response group is collaborating with people throughout Otago and now throughout New Zealand, and we took our case to Parliament 2 weeks ago, and it was well received there by some political parties, ignored by others at this stage. So we look forward, and as I said in the capping ceremony on Saturday, Dunedin is a strong town and gown collaboration, and I think that will continue, and I hope it does, because the university can contribute to the city's welfare, can produce ideas, and that collaboration needs to be fostered to the benefit of the city and particularly future generations.
Thank you.
Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, and thanks, Alan. One of the interesting things for me in the paper that you attached to your submission is the discussion around how problematic GDP is as a measurement, which is something I certainly have a lot of sympathy for. The more difficult question then is, which metric do you move to? And I wondered if you had a preferred measurement, and whether by appending this you're suggesting that the council move away from GDP as a measurement of its activity's success or failure.
Yeah, thank you for that. There's a strong move afoot. A lot of good publications, some come out of the University of Waikato, on a genuine environmental indicator, the society's indicator of genuine human improvements. Because GDP, of course, accounts for all the negative aspects of expenditure, pollution control, and so on. We need to get away from the GDP and look at the welfare of the people of the country, the world, in terms of genuine environmental improvements. And if you look at that in the context of GDP, it's a much less impressive growth result. So there are plenty of papers around indicating alternatives to GDP, which I certainly subscribe to.
And lastly, you don't mention it explicitly in your submission, but I wondered if you had any thoughts to offer on the idea of ethical investment of the City Council's shareholdings.
I do, and there's a move afoot, and many of the churches in New Zealand have taken the initiative of withdrawing their investment in carbon-based companies exploiting carbon resources to add to greenhouse gases. There's a move afoot to withdraw investments, and I'm not too sure what the city's investments are, but it would be a very supportive and positive move for the city to take its investments out of industry, which is known to be contributing to greenhouse gas emissions and thereby global warming.
Councillor Noon.
Thank you, Worship. Sir Alan, as a local authority, we often look at what other local authorities are doing and we rate ourselves often against those other local authorities. Have you got any idea whether data exists about the carbon footprint that exists associated with each individual local authority? Is there any data out there that we could...
To my knowledge, none has been analysed on that basis. But we do know that our carbon footprint nationally and globally is way beyond the ability of the Earth's resources to sustain in the long term.
No, I wasn't arguing that.
No,
I
no.
just wanted to,
I do not know of any analyses, research that's been done on that basis.
Councillor White.
Thank you, Sir Alan. One of the things that I look, and I really enjoyed reading your submission, is there any other small cities around the world that we could emulate? You know, under 500,000 people type of thing that really you think would be a great city for Dunedin to follow?
Scandinavian cities, I think, for the most part, are more enlightened in this respect. A lot of cities around the world and a lot of countries now are agreeing, accepting that global climate change is a serious issue. A report came through today from the US, from the President himself, to say that the US has to front up to global warming as a national issue, and they're deciding what action they should take. But I think worldwide, the Scandinavian cities would be the ones which I think are most enlightened in this context. Promotion of public transport, minimising the use of private transport, using renewable resources rather than carbon-based resources for energy production.
Okay, everybody wants to quote to me Scandinavian cities, but yet they get so much money out of their royalties from oil and gas that funds that. So I'm trying to find and try to educate myself on small cities that really can make an impact and grow on that basis. So I always look at taking Scandinavian countries out, cities out of that equation.
Well, your Councillor McTavish here has been around the world looking at some of these issues, and she can probably advise Council more effectively than I could on some of these issues. But there are cities around which are trying, even harder than Dunedin, to get off the syndrome of the carbon-based economy and look at more intelligently the availability of natural renewable resources. And everybody agrees New Zealand has a very high resource basis in renewable resources. And as I say, tidal is one of the more important ones in terms of what's available here. And there's been research done, and we know Cook Strait has one of the most highest potentials of any tidal system in the world. And there it sits right on the inter-island cable, well available for harnessing and distribution. And it seems to me promotion of electric vehicles with an electricity resource base, which I think could come from Cook Strait and other similar resources, will allow us to get off a carbon basis for private transport generally really, which is a major contributor to greenhouse gases.
Questions? Thank you, Sir Alan.
Thank you, Your
Worship. Submission is greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
Jenny Olsen. Welcome, Jenny. Welcome, Jenny. The next 5 minutes is yours, so we're in your hands.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today, everyone. I hope you've got a copy of the resolution that is part of my submission to the council here. And I'd also like to just pass around these copies here of an overview of the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, which is what I want to talk about today. And the reason that I'm here is the same reason actually as the resolution that was sent by the renewables from Motueka. I don't know if anyone's talking to the council about that one, but they've also they'd also like to draw your attention to the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. Now, this is an agreement that is being negotiated mostly in secret. Most of the information we have about it has come through leaks, but there are some very prominent people throughout New Zealand who are extremely concerned about the implications of this treaty. And this is a treaty that has the potential to have quite a profound effect on Dunedin and the council and its ability to do what it wants to support the people of Dunedin. This public interest resolution that you see here is intended, there's no financial element to this for the council, which will be a relief, I'm sure, but it's intended to draw government's attention to concern about this and to just let them know and express that people are aware of what's going on and are concerned about some of the implications of this treaty if it is signed. It has been adopted by the Auckland, Nelson and Tasman councils already, and various parts of it have also been addressed by Wellington, Palmerston North and Horizons, which is Manawatu and Wanganui, because they're just concerned that of the effect this will have on the citizens of their council region. So I won't go through the whole resolution here, but there are some particular elements of it that are of great concern to everyone. One of them is the potential for Pharmac to be undermined and the potential for medications to become much more expensive, which is something which will affect everybody in Otago and everywhere else. And this is due to conditions of the treaty that prioritise the profits of companies over the interests of individuals and of people. So another thing that's one thing that you may know about that's happening at the moment is the discussion of cigarettes being placed in plain packaging. And this is something that we all know would be really helpful in terms of stopping youth becoming using cigarettes. And our government has decided not to go ahead with that because they're waiting to see what the result will be of a case in Australia, which has been taken under a similar trade agreement to this Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement, but one that Australia is party to, in which Philip Morris, the tobacco company, can sue the Australian government for taking an action that damages their profits. And of course that action was putting cigarettes in plain packaging. And it's probably going to be a few years before that case is resolved. And our government has decided to wait before passing anything on plain packaging for cigarettes, even though it went through Parliament with a majority of 118 to 1. And who that one was, I'd really like to know, but I don't know. So this shows really that the government are taking the idea that private companies could sue governments for actions that could affect their profits. They're taking that very seriously. And that's something that could affect our ability to protect our environment, to protect our own resources, our own businesses and communities, because if an action is taken that can affect the profits of these companies, there is a risk that they will sue over it. And again, I'd like to commend Professor Marks for his submission just now, which again will rely on the freedom of this region to be able to act on the environment, and that could be compromised by this Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement. I'm not sure how long I've been talking for. I think we've got the clock at all. I'm not really used to this.
It'll probably be about the time to
thank you.
Come to a conclusion.
So, really what I'm asking is just asking Council here to do the right thing for the future of Dunedin and all of us, and put forward your opposition to the Trans-Pacific, or rather, what I should say is your concern about the issues covered by the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We're not asking Dunedin City Council to oppose the government overtly, but we're asking them to consider the things that could be affected by this partnership and continue to care for the concerns and the the citizens of our region. Now, I've also got, which I'd like to table, 170 signatures in support of this resolution, which was signed at a recent day of action against the Trans-Pacific Partnership in the Octagon. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jenny. Are you happy to take questions?
Yes, more than happy.
Questions, councillors? Councillor Battles.
Is your main concern regarding the Trans-Pacific Partnership that it tends to cement a whole lot of power in the hands of international corporate organisations?
Oh, I think that's, yes, that is one of the very big concerns. That's a very good summary of what it could do.
So the reason that is that it's being driven, why do you think countries are buying into something which...
Well, I think that there is a misconception that what is good for corporations and companies is always good for everyone. And I think there's a growing realisation that is not always the case. And there have been quite a few claims put forward for the benefits of this treaty, and I do have information on that here as well, which an organisation within New Zealand challenged Tim Grosser, quite a few of Tim Grosser's statements on the potential benefits. Mr. Grosser, I could give you more figures from this, claimed that $5 billion a year boost to the export economy, but was not able to divulge the source of that claim. The New Zealand Sustainability Council has examined in detail these claims and found that the rationale was severely flawed. Less than a quarter of those claimed benefits have any basis at all. And this, of course, is not taking into account the fact that there are quite a few downsides, including the fact that Pharmac could be finding themselves paying a lot more for medication than they currently are.
So you see this Trans-Pacific Partnership Treaty as being driven by the big corporates. What is your understanding, if it is signed up to, what is your understanding about the ability to be able to withdraw from the treaty afterwards once we've signed up to it?
No, that won't be able to happen. Once it will be a binding treaty, and because it's a treaty, it's not subject to government review. So any future governments will be left with the results of this treaty. And I have to say that there are people within every country, all the 12 countries that are taking part in it, there are people throughout all those countries who are strongly opposed for the same reasons as I am, the people I'm representing, and the people who wrote the resolution. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Vincent Clark.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your very appropriate alert to this threat, I think.
Oh, thank you.
How long did it take you to collect your signatures?
Well, I collected them through most of them, the bulk of them, through about an hour and a half in the Octagon.
Okay.
On the 29th of March during
So I'm just trying to get a feel for what that number of signatures means.
Oh, righto,
so
yes.
When you were presenting your clipboard to people, what sort of success rate did you have on passers-by?
They were very happy to sign. I don't think anyone refused. People were concerned about what they heard, and they were
informed about the issue?
Yeah, they were. There were a number of speakers on the day, and we were giving out information, the same information sheet I've just handed round, and people spoke about their concerns about the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I mean, it is difficult because negotiations are being conducted in secret. There's been no discussion in Parliament or in any select committees or any other forum as to the effects this will have on New Zealand. And I suppose one of the main concerns a lot of people have is the secrecy, because there are quite a few elements that we don't even know about. And the fact, of course, we think that the secrecy might indicate that there are things people wouldn't agree with in it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, and thanks, Jenny, for presenting this to us, and you'll be pleased to know that you're not the only person who has submitted this very same charter for our consideration over the next couple of weeks. Just with regards to the resolution itself, some of them explicitly refer to Dunedin City or Dunedin City Council, and others are more general, is it the intention for it to apply to all signatory nations, or is it just a call on the New Zealand government to make sure that these things exist for New Zealand?
Well, I mean, this specifically can obviously only be for New Zealand. This resolution has been adapted for one. I didn't write it. It was written by this group in Nelson, and they have written to every council in New Zealand. And I've put in Dunedin City Council in as appropriate throughout the resolution. So it will be the same one that is going everywhere. We're hoping to get as much support throughout New Zealand as we possibly can. I'm sure there are groups in the other countries that are involved as well, but I'm not sure what format their kind of attempts to bring it to more awareness, what format they're taking.
I think
if that answers your question.
To a degree, I think my question is, say for example, 8 does not reduce our flexibility to support local economic and industry development and encourage good employment and environmental practices and initiatives. Would you be comfortable with a Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement that assured New Zealand of that right, but not our trading partners who are also signatories to that treaty?
Well, no, I mean, I would hope that any adaptations to the treaty would cover all the people who were party to it. And I must also say, of course, that if any members of council have got any particular issues with this resolution and would like to adapt it or adopt it in part rather than in full, that would be absolutely fine. I mean, more than happy to, for that to happen at whatever you feel is the most appropriate, in the most appropriate way.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your submission.
Oh, thank you for listening.
Appreciate it.
Very good.
Stuart Griffiths, Otago Sculpture Trust. Well, pretty sure that neither of you is.
No, that's true. I'm just going to address that, David. In the absence of Stuart, myself, Stephen Mulqueen and Peter Nichols are going to outline these key points regarding the Otago Sculpture Trust DCC 2014 Annual Plan Submission. Okay, we welcome this opportunity to be present at this hearing today. Okay, some background. The Otago Sculpture Trust has been actively involved with the promotion of sculpture in public places in Dunedin since 2002. In this time it has produced 3 publications, including one revised edition, which Peter's just sent around the table, that locate and provide information on the public sculpture within the Otago University or University of Otago and City of Dunedin. The Otago Sculpture Trust has long been a strong advocate for the establishment of an independent body to develop and select proposals for public sculpture in Dunedin. This independent model has been used in cities such as Wellington and Palmerston North to great effect. These cities now have international collections of public sculpture. The need to establish such a model in Dunedin was recognised within an independent research paper commissioned by the Community Trust of Otago in 2002 and published in commissioned in 2000 and published in 2002. This report is commonly known as the Jan Hudson Report. In light of the past and sometimes fraught public art commissioning process, the Otago Sculpture Trust acknowledges that the DCC has put on hold its art and public places policy while a new art strategy for the city is being developed.
Stephen, I don't want to interrupt you, but I note that you're reading your submission. Everyone here has read it.
Yes, okay.
And since you've got 10 minutes, you're perfectly at liberty to read it, but you've got 10 minutes. So can I suggest that you might prefer to speak to it and add value rather than read it because we've all read it?
Right. I had actually read this out in 10 minutes.
You can do what you like. I'm just pointing out that that's what you've got, and then we go on to questions.
Okay, I wasn't expecting that. Okay, so I'm just giving some background there, but anyway. Okay.
Go straight to the proposal.
Okay, proposal. Otago Sculpture Trust recognises in the Warehouse Precinct Plan that there is a site identified where a sculpture could be installed under the Jetty Street and Cumberland Street overbridge, and that this sculpture site has the potential for galvanising a fresh approach to achieving public art installation outcomes in the city. The Otago Sculpture Trust proposes a 10-point plan as a way forward. 1. DCC and OST to sign a memorandum of understanding, and this would include mutually agreed commitments, obligations, expectations and timeframes. 2. OST to develop a project brief in conjunction with DCC staff and present this to Council. This would include a critical pathway to the completion of a project. 3. DCC to approve the brief. 4. DCC to commit seed funding for the project. This would assist with OST's administration and preliminary seeding costs. 5. OST to commence private fundraising for the project and establish a budget outline for the commissioning of the project and report back to Council. 6. OST to call for expressions of interest for the project and assess proposals for further development. 7. OST to select and shortlist potential proposals for consideration and report to Council with these selected proposals. 8. OST to manage the commissioning of the successful proposal and its installation with assistance with DCC staff. 9. The selected public artwork to be installed and signed off. 10. Undertake an assessment of the project and ascertain what improvements could be needed for future commissions and report back to Council with any recommendations and changes. Under note, as in the case with the Wellington Sculpture Trust, OST would form a subcommittee that would review and select proposals for further development and facilitate these concepts from the commissioning process to eventual installation. On the subcommittee, there would be a cross-section of specialists who have a stated interest in public sculpture and can offer specific knowledge and experiences in all aspects of the commissioning process. These specialist members will be recognised practitioners and professionals in their fields with proven track records in construction, engineering, architecture, landscape architecture and planning. A balance will be sought within the subcommittee with inclusion sought from community and cultural advocates. For example, iwi representation and business leaders in the city would be present. The DCC would have nominated staff present and in attendance at all subcommittee meetings. OST members on the subcommittee will chair and facilitate these meetings, taking minutes and then reporting back to both the OST main body and the DCC on all stages of these proceedings. Operational support. Depending on the proposal that has been selected, operational support and seed funding will be called upon for commissioning and final installation work. The OST subcommittee would assist with locating the appropriate support personnel and additional resources that might be required. Initially, a voluntary position will manage the commissioning process, but it is anticipated that a project management person may be employed to assist with the management, commissioning and installation of a selected sculptural proposal. As all public places are under the authority of the DCC will need to be actively involved in all aspects of site selection and site management. Naturally, any public work or activity will be undertaken within DCC permitting and building code regulations. All public notification and media PR generated by OST and DCC pertaining to the commissioning and installation of public sculpture will be passed by a DC representative on the subcommittee. Finally, thank you. Please feel free to ask any questions regarding this presentation.
Right, Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you. Thanks, Stephen and Peter for coming. Do you accept that art in public places is a broader conversation than sculpture in public places, and can be painting or film or music or...
If you think about 150 years ago, what you might have thought was sculpture, and then look today at what sculpture is, it's not the same. So what I'm saying is that sculpture has become a very broad and generic practice for a lot of things, including video practice, performance, and a lot of other kind of media-based works. So sculpture as such, as I'm saying, that if you were to look at, you know, a figurative work 100 years ago, it's not the same today. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I'm going, which leads me to wonder whether, if we were to expand that brief, whatever the art and public places policy becomes, if it is far more broad than just sculpture, whether or not the Otago Sculpture Trust would have be best placed expertise-wise to hold that responsibility with regards to commissioning and looking after work. I guess, and it's no slight on the trust itself, just that it could become far bigger than that, and I wonder whether you would still endorse the model as proposed if it wasn't the OST as that group, and it potentially could be another group that was, I mean, it did include representatives of the Sculpture Trust, but it wasn't.
Well, the thing is, our trust has been largely ignored. Dunedin City is lagging sadly behind most larger cities in New Zealand. I've had people come through from Germany, parts of Europe, who are amazed by the amount of sculpture in New Zealand and New Zealand cities. Places like Hamilton, New Plymouth, Palms North, Wanganui, and Wellington is a big city, but there's a huge amount of public art. And this trust has the knowledge, but we're not being asked to put that knowledge forth. There are things happening. There's a thing that's happened out at Mosgiel, which has been sadly neglected, a sculpture there by a German sculptor who lived here for 15 years, Ziegfeld Klogelmeier. Things have to happen, and what we're doing here is saying, give us a chance, and we can produce people in a subcommittee who are recognised practitioners, architects, landscape architects, town planning, social advocates. There are a lot of people here who really respect art and want to have it produced. Active business leaders. In the past, the Art and Public Places group was underrepresented by people who were experts in the field of this type. That's all they're saying.
So, in your opinion, the OST is the best placed group to be advancing art and public places in Dunedin?
Well, as I said in my opening comments, we've been around, you know, for 12 years, and we grew out of practitioners coming out of, you know, local institutions, and I think we've had a track record of documenting work and, in some ways, sitting on the fringes, looking at various methodologies about how public art should be commissioned. And we're at this point now where we're saying confidently to this group that we have a fresh approach to how this application can be applied.
Based on proven approaches from other...
Yes, but we are practitioners, we have public art out there. We've learned from some of these processes about how to effectively make these procedures better, I think.
I have a large number of publicly cited works in Auckland and private. There's 2,000 publicly cited works of art in Auckland, sculptures, and there's a dozen or so here. So, you know, we're standing behind, cities are measured by their culture, aren't they? And we've got everything else but a lot of commissioned public sculpture in Dunedin.
Aaron, I think you're hinting at something. I'm not sure. Can you just, is there something behind your question? Just in terms of,
no, absolutely.
I feel like I'm just trying to get...
No, just what I said, just that I think the discussion is broader than sculpture, and isolating media rather than taking a broader approach may not be the most productive way.
But the notion of sculpture now is wider than...
I agree.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor McTavish.
Thank you, and thank you both for coming in. The question that I have is the warehouse precinct opportunity that you have identified, is that because you're passionate about that particular location, or is it just because you can see that that is an area that the council is currently investing in and something you'd like to contribute to? I guess the question is that location part and parcel of the pilot, or could it be another location?
Well, we are really impressed by what's happening there. We've been through a lot of the revitalisation work, and it's incredible. It's one of the most amazing things that's happened. And we were offered this site. We didn't initiate it, but
I mean, it is problematic in some ways, in that it's under a bridge in some ways. And I think from my experience that in some ways the placement of sculpture is one of the more difficult things to pull off in an art commission, is its location. And if you think about Wellington City, when you walk around that, how many public artworks are on the precinct corners of Lambton Quay? You know, you're bumping into them all the time. And but I think the placement of sculpture, and I think that site is one of the sites that is owned by the DCC. All the rest of that area is privately owned. So in that sense, it is kind of a challenge, but it's limiting as well. Yeah.
That was the reason we were given, that it was the only site owned by the DCC.
No, that's fine. I didn't understand that it had been given to you by staff. I missed that
It's
part.
been suggested, I should say.
Yeah.
It hasn't, you know, it hasn't been given yet. We're in the process of setting up a structure that will implement that 10-point plan.
Yep.
Okay, and this is what you're sitting around here to hear and to consult on.
Thank you for that clarification.
Councillor Wiley.
Thank you. Would this artworks or commissions be only open to Dunedin artists or Otago artists, or would it go nationwide?
Initially, this particular one, we're limiting it to Otago, but generally speaking, any commission is open to anyone within the country or beyond.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you very much for your submission. I think there's two parts to it, and I just want to clarify. One is the policy part that you're asking, when this is an annual plan, usually about dollars, hearing, and my understanding is that you're asking two parts to this. One is that there's a policy decision to have a memorandum of understanding with you that may or may not require us to put money into it, because it may be privately commissioned sculptures.
It'll be a combination.
But what is the quantum you're talking about that you want us to put in the annual plan? So it's just a process. It's really awkward to deal with this next week, not knowing, what that quantum is.
$10,000 asked for in
I
here.
didn't see that. Okay.
Yeah, I think you've asked for $10,000 seed funding.
Right. Okay.
Staff comments.
Oh, and staff comments, but it's not in the actual. Okay, sorry. I tried to.
Maybe you didn't ask for it. Maybe that was just what staff suggested.
Well, I just want to. I want to check that. Is it? Yeah.
I think for this particular project there is a private funder on the horizon, right? But again, you know, what's been problematic in the past is that some projects have been funded totally by DCC, and what we're advocating is a combination of private funding with city funding. I think that's the best avenue to explore, where it's not totally a city-funded.
Now, this is the case in Wellington, where money is sought after by donations.
Or a private patron can be brought into the equation to assist with, you know, the coupling of funding.
Look, I appreciate that you.
No, we don't have figures.
Yeah, okay. Well, can I just ask the question then? Could we have clarification before we deliberate next week as to whether that 10,000 is going to be sufficient for doing this? Because there's no point us considering 10,000 if that isn't the quantum that you actually need to address this. Is that okay?
Right. More questions? Thank you for your submission. We'll look forward to getting that extra information. It's great. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Peter. Mr. Love. Welcome, Harry. The next 5 minutes are yours to use as you wish, and then we the questions.
Well, my proposal, as you've undoubtedly read, is both modest and specific, so I won't be very long. It seems to me that to put a levy on tickets for the stadium is as they use the phrase, a no-brainer. I think that it's an important thing to do because although it's hardly something which is going to shift the council's finances onto a different axis, it is certainly something which could at least mitigate or help to address a larger problem. That is, it seems to me, first of all, unarguable that the stadium is a rather large chicken in the nest. It takes up more financial room than any individual object ought to. And the consequence of that, of course, is that it has this sort of cuckoo in the nest effect, and it's difficult to put your finger on to be specific about exactly how, but it's probably unarguable, I think, that other community or money for other community activities will be affected by that. Therefore, it seems to me that in some respects the council has a moral duty to find whatever way it can, however humble, to mitigate the effect of that. So the proposal is quite simply to put a levy, a council levy, on all tickets sold for commercial events at the Forsyth Bar Stadium. I've attempted to come up with some sort of figures. The figures I've got are rather fuzzy, but I won't go through them in detail, but it seems to me that on the face of it, the proposal could raise $500,000 a year, which could be used for any number of things. There are precedents for this, as I've said, particularly the $5 surcharge that people pay to cross from Bluff or Invercargill to Stewart Island, which has much the same, is therefore much the same sort of purpose. It's also, I believe, a very common thing to happen in various American cities, where a local authority has a levy on top of whatever tickets are sold for a stadium that they own. It should be, given sticking to commercial events only, where tickets are sold, it should not be a difficult task to actually calculate what is involved and what sums of money involved are. I can see counter-arguments in that some people might argue that this would have a negative effect on attracting people to particular events. I'm inclined to think that that would be minimal. If anyone is prepared to pay anything from $25, $50, $150, $200 for whatever event it might be, an extra $2 or $3 is not going to make a great deal of difference to them. So what I'm simply asking is that the council proceed to explore the practicalities of this proposal and to come up with possible options or methods for doing it, hopefully to have it functioning in the next financial year. Thank you.
Questions, councillors? Councillor Hawkins.
Just with regards to where you would want to see the money spent, I mean, you mentioned in your submission that it would cover the events attraction fund. is it your intention that it would do that?
I mean, well, at this point, what I'm principally trying to establish is simply the principle, the idea of doing it. There are any number of options, of course, for what you do with the money. You could give it to other community, satisfy other community demands that may be affected by the demands of paying for the stadium. You could dedicate it to paying off the capital. That frankly doesn't bother me particularly much. It just seems to me that there is a moral duty to find ways to mitigate the obvious, somewhat malignant financial effect of this thing.
Because I mean, I think that where it goes is important. Otherwise, it could easily be seen as tax for tax's sake, rather than targeting it. It's like, we're going to take this.
Well, as I say, I personally have no particular strong feelings on that. But yes, it probably would be a good idea to make it clear where it's going, whether it's to pay off capital or to assist with other, community demands or whatever.
Thank you. Further questions? Dr. Love, thank you for your submission and its clarity. Thank you. Mr. Dykes. Welcome, Ross. Thank you. You're representing the Otago Cricket Association.
I am. Thank you. I heard your warning about not reading anything or talking about what I've already written.
Well, so, it's more to use the time you feel best can add value to your presentation.
Well, I hope I can also help catch up a bit. So I really just wanted to talk about what our proposal at the moment is just a concept, that we believe that now is the time to develop the University Oval to the next step, to keep pace with international cricket. We believe there's no better time to do it than when our game here in Dunedin and Otago is on a high, and also when we've got within the next 10 months 3 World Cup games here, which I think are bigger than any of us anticipated. It's a joint venture between the city and Otago Cricket, and I think both parties are realising now just what we've taken on and how big it is, and it will attract a viewing audience of 2.5 billion, where the Rugby World Cup was 1 billion. It will have at least 2,000 beds occupied in the city over a period of 12 days. It'll have over 200 journalists plus television crews. So it's a major event which will be broadcast worldwide, and it's an ideal opportunity, if we are going to present University Oval with lights, to spread the gospel, if you like, at that time. So we see some urgency. We've made it very clear in our letter that we're not asking the council for money for lights. We've already had a preliminary meeting with the mayor just to discuss the concept. So I guess it's the urgency that I'd like to highlight today, that if we are going to do it, we'd really like to be moving in the next few months. So come the World Cup, we can be telling the international audience that this is what is going to happen, that we can, through New Zealand Cricket, guarantee future games at University Oval. And under lights is vitally important now, because the major television audience is in Asia, and a day game just doesn't fit with them, whereas a night game is much better fit. So it's really to say to you, we'll do our best to look after the lights, but it is crazy to do something like this if we don't try and increase the capacity at the same time. So it's really an in-principle, yes, you guys, we can take care of not take care of paying for the banking, but clearing the way for us to increase the capacity. So that's where we're at, sir.
Questions, councillors? Councillor Thompson.
So, Ross, I'm just not clear as to what it is that you need from us to facilitate, you're saying it's not particularly money, is it around permission, is it around consent aspects, is it around getting rid of the trees so that the bank's bigger? I mean, I'm just not clear what you need from us.
Well, if we are going to, and what I've just distributed is something I didn't have when we lodged the submission, is a conceptual drawing from Spire of what it would look like, and that is taking into account what's been talked about for about a number of years anyway, of closing that particular part of Logan Park Drive, so the bank could extend back over that, and obviously those trees would have to come down. So it really is clearing the way via permission, if you like, and saying that yes, if you guys can get the lights up, we can help you increase the capacity by closing the road, by cutting down the trees. And I realise that's just not much more difficult than it is just saying it.
Can I just clarify, Ross, these trees are scheduled to be felled anyway? Is that correct?
I understand so. I believe they're in now danger.
That's right. I'm just clarifying that so we're all on one page with that.
I think we had a council member offer to take them down the weekend.
Councillor McTavish.
Ross, my question is just about the length of the boundary. I don't know a whole lot about cricket, but I understand that there's a short boundary at the Oval. Is that right?
Not particularly, no.
Not particularly, okay.
It used to be.
Oh, it used to be and it was extended. Okay, all right. So there's no chance that you'll do all this work and then international standards will say that boundary is too short?
No, I don't think the boundary would be a problem because we are the second biggest in dimension ground in the country after the Basin Reserve. We're significantly bigger than Eden Park.
Okay.
So no, there's not, I don't believe that's a problem.
So,
but there will, like anything in the world, there'll be increasing demands as professional cricket gets more professional. You know, we're trying to keep pace, and I think University Oval has kept pace really well.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Congratulations on how well the Otago players are doing. It doesn't usually get to the management that they get thanked for that, but I think there must be some due recognition for it. Just looking at the picture, and thank you for, it's much more clear to me now what you're looking for. You would be, so we'd be taking the trees down, but we'd also be realigning Logan Park Drive?
Yes.
As part of our costs? But you would do the embankment work, or we would do that as well? I'm just slightly unclear on that part.
Well, so am I, really.
Okay.
We've had a number of our close neighbours say, well, there aren't too many close neighbours, but we have had close neighbours say that they would assist us in terms of fill and machinery to contour the land.
Okay. So if we redid the road, has there been any negotiation with the people who use those sports grounds on the other side that would be changed, or does this not affect any actual sports ground on the other side of the road?
No, we've discussed this with Sport Otago, and they believe that the users will all be in favour of this, and in fact most users would benefit from the lights.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Thompson, did you have another question?
No, it's all right.
Councillor Bazette.
Yeah, Ross, I'm sorry, it might be in here somewhere, but I just missed the reasoning for the urgency that you spoke of a moment ago with regards to making a decision.
Well, I saw the urgency, the importance of being able to tell the world cricketing audience, if you like, that University Oval is going to go to the next step and have lights with a greater capacity. I think that the World Cup is a perfect opportunity to do that, and it also flags it to New Zealand cricket that we are continuing to advance. This coming year we've got 9 one-day internationals before the World Cup, pretty much all through January. We get one of those, and we only get one simply because of the time frame. If the following year is a series of test matches with Australia and Pakistan, New Zealand cricket have said if you can increase the capacity you will get an Australian test match. So we see the urgency in impressing the world, well, New Zealand cricket and world cricket, that we are keeping pace and will remain an international venue. And we're also competing with Christchurch. Don't forget that they're now coming on stream with Hagley Park, and they will be the preferred South Island option if we're not always a pace ahead of them.
Yeah, that's good, but I think that we can do that. We, being Otago Cricket, can do that anyway, regardless, without whether or not the DCC support it or not. I mean, they've obviously got to support because of their interest in the ground, but that will inevitably happen. I just didn't see the urgency for having that confirmed right now. That was all.
Well, no, but I think if we don't appeal to you now at this time, we might wait another cricket season, and I just don't like the idea of Christchurch getting ahead of us.
No, that's fair. Thank you.
Councillor Wiley.
Thank you, Ross. Cost for lights?
About $2 million. As you know, our chairman, Murray Hughes, is an electrician, and he's done some costing on that. And that would be state of the art, but they still require the 40-metre pylons.
Okay. Would you still see the ground being used for rugby in the wintertime?
Absolutely. I don't think we could be justified coming here to you if we didn't see it as a multi-purpose ground.
Despite the fact that you've already seduced Councillor Thompson, you're offering an Australian test, he wants to ask another
I'm
question.
up for it already, but well, I had two questions. It strikes me that this is the kind of project that requires a liaison point, and I just wonder whether you have that at the moment with council, because it does seem that there's a lot of ifs, buts and maybes in it, and it would help to clarify a lot of those quite quickly. And is this your first point of contact, or are you working with staff around what might be involved, what might be required, that kind of thing?
We've had a number of discussions. Liz Wheeler sitting on my left, and she's well aware of what we're trying to do, as is her department. But really this is the first, and we spoke to the Mayor a little bit earlier, but this is really the first public hearing of it.
And look, this is probably the stupidest question in the world, or the stupidest one for the day anyway, but with the lights, is there anywhere in the world where they've done lights that you can change the direction of which way they're facing? Because one of the issues that we've looked at with Logan Park is the ability to do more things at night, and to the extent that you may be able to use lights that are shining this way for a cricket match but that way for something else, might take this, and I have no idea whether something like that's possible, but can it at least be in the mind as to whether it's possible? Because
I think that's a really good question, because if in that plan that there was going to be an all-weather turf, where the, if you like to call the Highlanders ground currently is, Highlanders training ground is, if they could turn around to that, it'd be fantastic.
Councillor McTavish.
Yeah, I just had a follow-up question, just the spire drawing. How high is that? Is that about 5 metres?
Yeah, I think it's a wee bit more than that.
Yeah. And is there any reason why it couldn't be sloped off in the other direction so as to provide a spot for other people to look in the other, you know, much like Councillor Thompson's question for lights, but for the...
Well, I guess it could be, other than it would impact on the size of the Logan Park grounds themselves.
Yeah. Oh well. Yeah, worth conversation. Thank you.
Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you. There are two things here, by my understanding. You need lights for the ground to fit in with the Indian television schedule, or subcontinental television schedules, and you need a bigger ground to get top-tier test matches. Is that correct? Those are two...
Yeah, in principle, yes, although we also need lights domestically. The cricket followers will realise last year we finished first in the 2020 competition, and had to forego a home final because we didn't have lights.
So you don't see either of those as more of a priority than the other?
I think they go hand in hand. Okay. I think to have lights without an increased capacity would be foolish, but lights probably have led the thinking.
And apologies if this is in here and I haven't been able to find it quickly, but what kind of, in an ideal situation, when would that be operational, and working backwards from there, when would we need the road closed by and those sorts of things? Like how, we talk about urgency, like how urgent is that kind of work?
Well, we can't do anything to the ground physically now until after the World Cup, because they have got everything planned. Their seating and all the infrastructure they put in is already established. So we couldn't, at earliest we could start April, May next year.
To the end of the next domestic season?
Yes.
Pretty much? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bazet.
Yeah, just to progress this a little bit further, you're looking for support principle, and I don't know what other councillors feel, but certainly from my point of view, you've got that support. But the concern that I have is that when you've got any figures, to go on with costs and all that sort of thing, is there something that the union could do in the short term to get us those figures, so that we know, what the costs are going to be, so that you could get that support and principle sooner rather than later? It's unlikely the support and principle is going to come out in the next week or so, because we haven't got those figures. No. But if you get those figures as soon as you can, then the sooner the better. Then the council will discuss it, and then you may get that support that you're seeking. Is that something that you can do in the relatively short term?
We certainly would with that encouragement, yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Thank you, Ross.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Hall, sorry.
Have you got any indication on quantities and costs for your embankment?
No.
I got a bad habit of recycling, so if I knew them, just quite recently, it's 5,500 cubic metres been dumped at the landfill or recycled within 2 kilometres of you. So if we could get those kind of figures, it may be very cost effective.
Yeah, we've just sort of half answered the question, I guess. We got the Spire to do these conceptual drawings, and they've said if you want to proceed, let us know, and we'll get all those details of dimensions, and I'm sure they'd be able to provide that as engineers, would they?
Should be able to. One problem we had was when this was originally, the original embankment was put in, some engineers put specific requirements on the fill, which was not needed. So, because a lot of that fill comes from the southern water treatment plant down Green.
You're leading up to a question, Councillor Hall.
Yeah, so if you come up with quantities, we can look at try to recycle stuff in it rather than.
You might have to store it in your backyard in the meantime.
I've got a big backyard.
Thank you, Ross.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Now, councillors, before the next submission, can I seek some consensus on upcoming breaks? We have 2 more breaks scheduled, and we're also running an hour behind. So I'm going to suggest, rather than a 3:20, rather than a 3:15 break, and then a 5 o'clock break, that we have a break at 4 o'clock, a quarter of an hour, and that's it. So is everyone comfortable with that? Keep trucking, get before we have, it's been put out now, some manifesto, whatever, and then we carry on with it. Welcome, Laura. You're here to represent the Methodist Mission.
I am, thank you, Your Worship, councillors. Good afternoon. I have copies. Thank you. I want to cover.
For a moment there, I thought you said coffees.
I've internalised that as a complex situation. Not remotely decaffeinated today. I want to talk briefly to our submission on ethical investment in the South Dunedin Community Library facility, but I understand this is also the chance to talk to you about our civic grant application, so I'll be looking to use the bulk of my time in that regard. In terms of ethical investment, many people would think that the Waipori Fund's only responsibility is to maximise shareholder return. And for a council that finds itself with a rather large amount of debt servicing, that's hardly surprising. But I don't think that shareholder return can be your only yardstick. For instance, it's hard to imagine you supporting the fund should it choose to invest in, say, the yet-to-be-built Christchurch Stadium, or if Invercargill International Airport wanted to extend its runway, yeah? Because, or a firm even attempting to be a national monopoly provider on roading repairs, even though the profit streams to the fund might be considerable, you'd be cutting off your nose to spite your face. And the reason is because you have obligations and books that require balancing across more than just the fund's activities. And the fund's activities could conceivably have costs that need to be borne by council or by the community the council represents. We submit to you that the future costs of armament production, child labour, tobacco production, the production of pornography, compulsory or slave labour, pollution, discrimination in the workplace, environmental degradation, corruption and gambling are all immense and are frequently borne in local communities, with the possible exemption of armament production because the destruction there doesn't really happen until they're used. But the communities in which they are used face horrendous consequences. So we strongly support a more comprehensive screen for the Waipori Fund than the one that was proposed. In terms of South Dunedin Library, we have been long supporters of the establishment of a council facility in South Dunedin, and I note that we were formed there 124 years ago last month because of the long-standing, then in 1890, economic issues and social issues faced by that community. 124 years later, of course, South Dunedin, as we all know, remains a place of very high focus for council, I'm sure, but also for central government-funded activities. I note that in terms of civic amenities, I think it's well recognised per head of population that South D fares less well than other parts of town, particularly in terms of community spaces, and I'm thinking here especially of parks. Council investment in the storefront community centre through which you can pilot and assess community aspirations and interests for a more permanent civic amenity is an absolutely grindingly good idea, and we totally support it. So finally, our civic grant application. Hopefully you've all got one of these in the pack. I need to beg your apology and make a couple of corrections. On the inside page where it says funding is mostly local, I need to add Auckland City Council to the list of local body funders who support this kind of activity in their area. And on the page, and I think it's 3, 4, 5, 6, page that says the stats living in Dunedin, it looks like this. The figure of 25% receiving welfare assistance needs to increase to 45%. Because 20% of households nationwide receive working for families, which is an in-work benefit. And on the same page under housing stock, if I could add that 47% of Dunedin houses are in fuel poverty, I would appreciate that. What was that last percentage? 47. So the great anxiety about supporting beneficiaries tends to be the assumption, common sense really, that paying somebody to do nothing incentivises laziness. Welfare dependency, which is a sort of a theft from us all really, isn't it? All those of us who are taxpayers. And most recently we've seen this in the headlines about beneficiaries going on holiday. Minister Bennett had a moment or two in public around it. And I'd like to refer you to Michelle Accourt, who's normally known as a comedian, but writing in the press on the 9th of April, who said, we confuse unemployment with our I don't have to go to work fantasy. Now I don't know about you, but I've got a really well built one of those. And you picture yourself in your home as it is now, with all your stuff, hanging out with friends and family, and having a bit of a lie-in and some time to yourself. And you might have to tighten your belt, but you know, you'd be okay. And you finally have time to put in the garden and grow the vegetables you've always wanted to have and get really serious about doing your own renovations. She says, but what we don't factor in, of course, is the hopelessness of real poverty. The humiliation of not having a job title, knowing that every ad on TV is not aimed at you, getting cross with the kids because you live in daily terror, that what you will get broken or lost or worn out or used up, and you can't see a time when the plates or the raincoat or the peanut butter can be replaced. Being scared of winter because you worry about how keeping warm will take out of what you have for food, and not even being able to imagine a time when work gets better. It's not a state that people like or even get used to. It's a state of perpetual stress. And I suggest to you that welfare dependency is actually one of the great canards of our time. It's a useful beat-up for the media. It's fuelled by the odd anecdote, but utterly unsupported by the actual evidence. For instance, despite the considerable investment by government in rooting out welfare fakery, and there are a few governments as motivated as this one, in 2011-12, which is the last year for which we've been able to find figures, only $23 million of welfare fraud was prosecuted by Work and Income. It's less than 1% of the total welfare spend. But given that in the same period they investigated one way or another nearly 44,000 instances of benefit overpayment in comparison, which is a departmental error, and in nearly 20% of the investigations nothing was found to be amiss. Fraud was found in just 1.6% of cases investigated, with 80% being caused by departmental error. For comparison's sake, and just 2 years later, IRD reported total overdue debt from taxpayers of $6 billion. Even with a workforce numbering 10 times that of those on benefits, it's a staggering difference. The people who are ripping us off are not people getting welfare benefits. It's taxpayers. I'm sorry. And there's a couple of happy little graphs there just to sort of throw that into light relief. So why the persistent problem with unemployment now that we've got our rockstar economy? What else explains the stubbornness of the unemployment figures? And I note today that the media are reporting that unemployment is steady at 6% official rate and around 10% unofficial. Well, here in Dunedin we've got very few entry-level jobs. Those who are below average in school achievement, and remember that's half the population, right? The way statistics works is below average is half and above average is the other half. They don't have a great many employment options. Nationally, the rockstar economy is fronted by the Christchurch rebuild, an effort so intense a large portion of the workforce will have to be brought in from overseas. We just don't have that many builders we can spare all at once. And finally, from the National Business Review last year, they note that we actually didn't shed as many jobs during the recession as we might have, because what employers did was they lowered the average hours of employees they had. As production increases, the existing workforce will simply have its hours re-expanded. There won't be a lot of new hiring. So it's going to take a while, and in the meantime, heat or eat is going to be the dilemma for far too many in our city. Around New Zealand, the Auckland, Lower Hutt, Upper Hutt and Wellington City Councils all provide financial or support in kind for specialist welfare advocacy services. Here in Dunedin, we're asking you for your support to establish and maintain a service focused on maximising the income of those of our citizens who have the least income, least work and least resiliency, the infirm, the elderly and the unemployed. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Questions, councillors? Councillor McTavish.
Laura, just looking at your budget, you're asking us for 40. Okay, I see in your application, civic grant application form, you note you've got approved funding from 3 other funders. Yep. So what you're asking from us is effectively balance, is that right?
That's correct.
Yep. And in the event that we were able, for example, to provide support in the form of something like accommodation, would that be helpful, or is that...
No, the mission has accommodation. Thank you. We've got 4 sites at the moment. I'm sorry, what we're looking for here is cash.
Just thought that would be good to clarify. Yeah. Thank you.
Further questions, councillors? Councillor.
I'll just say, look, I've really enjoyed hearing this and thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Pleasure.
Passion. Thank you. Mr. Hamill. Welcome.
Hello.
The next 5 minutes are yours.
Thank you.
as you've read, and I'll just try and add value if I can, I want to suggest that the Council should divest from the fossil fuel industry as part of its ethical investment policy. I guess in principle, but if one wanted to be more specific, for instance, to exclude coal, oil and gas companies in the New Zealand Stock Exchange and the largest 100 international oil, coal and gas companies would be a good start. I want to offer both an economic and a moral argument for your consideration, and I hope I'm not repeating material that you're well familiar with. 97% is a very big number. Just to reflect for a moment on that, 97%. Imagine a world where a very wealthy bread company sold a particular kind of bread which contained lethal qualities of a chemical that chemists and nutritionists, 97% of those in that specific scientific discipline, believed to be carcinogenic. How would the government respond? For a council to disregard such a consensus is like disregarding the scientific consensus on evolutionary theory in favour of the notion that the world was created 7,000 years ago. Far and away, I think the largest surveys of recent years of scientists have come up with clear results that Doran and Kendall in 2009 on anthropogenic climate change, 3,146 Earth scientists, that's a more broad category, compared with the Gallup poll, 97% of publishing climate scientists accept anthropogenic climate change, high 80s for Earth scientists and only 58% for the general public. Anderegg, Kroll, Harold and Schneider in 2015, similar results looking at the publications of those climate researchers, 98-97% of publishing climate researchers with over 20 publications to their name. And assessed by academic ranking and expertise, only 2% of the top 50 and 3% of the top 100 are sceptics. The conclusion of both papers is that there's no actual real debate among scientists on anthropogenic climate change, just consensus and an enormous gap between public perception and science. According to the Grantham Institute and Carbon Tracker Research, if we're to have an 80% chance of avoiding serious global danger and keep climate change to within 2-degree rise, frankly, if I'm going to wake up in the morning, they do the figures for a 50% chance of making this grade. I don't want to wake up in the morning with a 50% chance of avoiding being run over by a bus. I want an 80% chance. Then we have to burn no more than 20% of, quote, known fossil fuel reserves. That's 80% of known fossil fuel reserves must stay in the ground. We're talking about known fossil fuel reserves. There's absolutely no point in further exploration when we cannot burn the reserves we already know about. Carbon Tracker and Grantham Institute then go on to argue that this means that there is a gap between the market value of stocks, fossil fuel companies, and their real value in the light of their future unburnability. Once the market realises that these fuels are unburnable, therefore that the equities are overvalued, the carbon bubble, as it's called, will burst. In short, ethical and moral issues aside, investment in the fossil fuel industries are risky investments. So I want to appeal to your wallet, your prudent responsibility for our funds, but also to your consciousness. We could play Russian roulette with this issue in the hope that science will come to our rescue. Science when it suits us, eh? When it's the lives of our children and grandchildren that are at stake. Russian roulette with coastal urban areas like St Kilda or London. Russian roulette with vulnerable third world environments like our Pacific neighbours and places like Cambodia, susceptible to hurricanes and floods. Or we could make a stand now and join the international divestment movement. It doesn't mean we can instantly do without oil products. It just means we are making a start towards encouraging and speeding up the transition towards sustainable energy. Ethical investment like this have a proud history, and divestment has had a part to play in the past, challenging, for example, the apartheid regime, the tobacco industry, to mention a couple of examples that I'm aware of. So I invite you to invest our funds both wisely and ethically. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hamill. Questions, councillors? There appears to be none. Thank you for your submission. Much appreciated.
You're welcome. Thank you for your attention.
Mr. McBride. Welcome, Nicholas.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Hello. Mayor Cole, councillors, thank you for this opportunity. I simply want to very briefly acknowledge the support that the council continues to provide to the Arts Festival, now known as Arts Festival Dunedin, formerly Otago Festival of the Arts. I would like to put it on record that the festival was very appreciative of the fact that when this organisation had a rough patch at the end of the previous season, the Dunedin City Council was at our side to ensure that the organisation didn't fall over, which was very possible, and that the Dunedin City Council was the initial organisation to come to the festival's aid, so that we could get back up on our feet again, and away we go. So all I want to do is thank you for your support and let you know that it's business as usual. We have a festival this year. We launch in August. We launch our program in August. The festival is this October, the 10th to the 19th, and that we look forward to your continued support so that the festival can develop and re-establish its position in the city as the icon event, which the City Hall has labelled us as. Sorry, bad syntax. And to also say that the future of the festival is at the moment secure, and that we would anticipate further consolidation and expansion of what we do and how we do it in the future with other ideas and other plans that, and rather than just doing a biennial event, we would supplement that with other activities throughout the 2-year cycle. So that's all I have to say. But thank you.
Succinct.
So,
any questions, Councillor?
Yeah, catch up on your time.
There aren't any questions.
Thank you.
Yes, we're pleased to see you back in the chair, and we'll look forward to the Arts Festival in October.
Thank you, Michael.
Mr. Brown. Welcome, Mr. Brown. The next 5 minutes are yours to use.
Your Worship, Your Mayor and Councillors, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you about pool space at Moana Pool and alternatives or some suggested sites. I did speak to this forum last year, and I'm not quite sure what the outcome was. So it'd be interesting to know in due course how your working committee is going. But this is really just a reiteration of the comments last year, and I'll pass this aerial photograph around, and it indicates the green area at the Esplanade St Clair that is, in my view, available as an alternative to solve the pool congestion at Moana. The area is already owned by council. It's not reserved, so it doesn't have those complications. It is certainly of a size and of a locality and a topography where the construction of a all year round covered pool is very, very feasible. From my observation, and it is just my observation, it doesn't appear to be a green area that's used widely by the public. If there are folk there from time to time, invariably they seem to be in transit through to the beach. So it doesn't appear to be the loss of a parks area or recreation area. I have no idea just what stage the working committee have got to in their deliberations to solve the pool space, but I would just like to remind them once again that this space is here, and encourage them to look at it again. I guess to go a little further, and this might be a little unusual, but because I'm interested in the site and aquatic activities anyway, I'm available to either assist or comment or have some input into that group or committee. I don't quite know how that might work, but you could pass the offer along and see where it might lead.
Thank you.
So that is.
Thank you. Questions, councillors? Councillor Anthony. It's pretty clear submission, pretty clear suggestion, so we'll take that.
Thanks for the
Thank you for that. Mr. Smith. This is, councillors, the previous one, Darryl Hall, has been taken out, so this is the page 235. Welcome, Mr. Smith.
Thank you. I have just two concerns. One is I want to add my voice to most of the Kearys Bay residents that are against Port Otago's submission to increase the container heights. The Environment Court has already made a ruling on this, that it should only be 3 containers high on boiler point, and on occasions 5. Well, everybody knows that lives in Kearys Bay that it's always 5. So my concern is that if they're allowed to have 5, they'll make it 7. The next issue I wish to raise is there is no policing of Port Otago's flagrant disregard to environmental court decisions, flagrant disregard to the community that they operate in, and a flagrant disregard to the City Council. I rang up the City Council and spoke to the appropriate people about the containers being too high to put in a complaint. I was told that something would be done. I said, well, I'll ring back later. I waited for a month. Nothing was done at all. And when I asked what was done, I was told it was being referred, and that Port Otago had been asked to reduce the container height. That's a bit like ringing the police when you've got a burglar, and the police asking the burglar to go away. There seems to be no teeth to for Port Otago to stick to the rules. They seem to do what they like, and they disregard everybody else. So I'm concerned that it's going to be against the Environmental Court decision, and I'm concerned that the council seem to do absolutely nothing when it comes to policing their fraudulent activities.
Thanks, Mr. Smith. Councillor Benson.
Thank you. On how many occasions have you had cause to ring up the call centre or whomever and make a complaint like that?
Personally, 4, but I'm not the only person that complains.
And did the same course of events you just articulated, did that transpire each time?
Yes. In other words, nothing happens. There is no consequences for the port at all.
And did you get any communication back to you about the result of your call?
No, the only communication I got after I rang after a month was, oh, it's been referred on to someone.
And 4 complaints, that's over what sort of time period?
A couple of years.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilde.
Thank you. Port Otago is under the ORC. Have you spoken to the ORC?
Apparently, the policing of the containers is with the DCC. That's my understanding. That's why I rang the DCC.
Councillor New.
Mr. Smith, my understanding is that the ORC have a requirement to receive complaints, note complaints and follow up complaints, and there is a Port Otago liaison committee you'll be aware of.
Yes.
And they meet, I think, on a 6-weekly cycle.
Yes.
And generally they discuss issues that have been logged in their system and look at whether those issues have been resolved or not. And that was my understanding how those on-site issues were dealt with. I'm sorry that's not a question, but...
Yeah, but the point is it's not being dealt with. I mean, the fact of the matter is that if there's a ruling that says it only should be 3 high, occasionally 5, and it's consistently 5 high, something's not working.
What I was trying to clarify was that some complaints are going through our system, our CSA system, but my understanding is that the majority of complaints are supposed to be dealt with by the company through that mechanism that was part of the Environment Court decision many years ago.
Regardless of that, the submission is for the court to make it 5 high, and my real fear is that once they've got that, they'll just make it 7, and that will continue to be 7, and there's nothing that can be done about it or will be done about it.
And that's a 2GP second generation thing.
Yes.
Just as a matter of interest, Mr. Smith, is noise an issue for you from the port?
No, absolutely. If you've got 7 high, you're going to have more noise, more containers, more lights, more machinery.
That's really what I was alluding to, because as I understand it, if they're 5 high, less noise escapes the port than if they're 3 high. No, I'm not saying in any way that that necessarily justifies it, but that is apparently a fact. So there's an interesting relationship between a barrier and the amount of noise that can.
Sure.
Thank you. If there's no further questions, thank you for your submission, Mr. Smith. Mr. Harvey. Good on you.
I don't know if that's good on you. Have to play it in here somewhere, I'm told.
This is the make good
I may have to wing it.
Just had these 5 minutes.
Is that the first one?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
That's all right. We might have to, you may have to retreat to mime.
You've got 2 minutes to go.
The council's technology is way behind.
That's right. It takes 3 hours to do it, and it can't be too good. Or we can't be too good, one or the other. I think that's what people like.
It's just recording it now.
Dave, what do you do about Mr. Smith? What do you do about Mr. Smith?
Got another week, is it? No.
It's on nearly 7 minutes.
Yes, it's going for long.
Did I? Oh, give your eyes. What's your glasses on?
Right. You're on your way.
How many minutes have I got?
You have 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Okay, thanks very much for that. Good afternoon, everybody.
But if you take less than that, we won't.
I'm going to be here till I'm kicked out probably, until I get the money.
Very close.
Thank you. I hear that you're considering setting up an iconic buildings trust, iconic buildings fund, to help people with iconic buildings fund their redevelopment. Iconic's a strange word, someone else mentioned it today here. There's some sort of Russian word originally apparently. Anyway, I'm here today to talk to you about, I have a project which would be ideal for the iconic fund, and it's probably the only iconic building in Dunedin that's ready to go with money from such a fund. But presuming you agree that the fund will go ahead. This is the Dunedin prison, Number 2 Castle Street, Dunedin. That's what it looks like at the moment. We're running tours regularly through it and they're very popular. We haven't lost anybody yet, but it's damn cold in there at the moment. I can offer overnight accommodation for any councillors. This is the same view sort of thing back at about 1950 on A30 there. And you can see it's got iron fence and it's got big gate posts, and we plan to reinstall all those things as part of our redevelopment. So the history, briefly, purchased by this trust in 2012. It had been vacant since 2007, about 8 years, and it's the only iconic building ready to roll with big funding. Iconic, yes. Why is it iconic? It's NZHPT. It's on the NZHPT register. It's a building of national heritage significance. It's been heritage covenanted by the NZHPT. We're only allowed to do certain things to the building. There's been a conservation plan prepared. We've got it. It's about 1,000 pages long. You can't carry it without a wheelbarrow. The DCC have listed this building in the district plan. It's located in one of the most amazing heritage precincts in New Zealand, and many nearby buildings are also listed. So it's right in the centre of a very much heritage precinct. And it's just sort of sitting there, biding its time, waiting for a friendly white knight. Significance. The building, the conservation plan talks about the significance of the building, and consultants that did this believe that it reflects important aspects of New Zealand's history. It's got a large association with events and persons or ideas of importance in New Zealand's history. It can provide knowledge of New Zealand history. It has importance to Maori. That's because some of them were consigned there from time to time. Community association. The community at the moment is quite keen on the old building, and the public esteem is high as it's ever been for the place, probably. Oops. Ooh. It's too dark in here.
Yeah, sorry. It's for our
Yeah. The value of the design of the place is fairly rare. It's a rare courtyard design. It was designed by the architect Campbell, based on the old Scotland Yard building in London. And it has a lot of similarities with that building. It's a very rare design around the world, and it's a rare type of historic place. And it forms part of a wider historical and cultural landscape. So, our vision: the project must be commercially viable and self-sustaining. It's been a given from the start. We don't see too much future in having to beg and run cake stalls for the rest of our lives. Not that I've got much life left, but other people might have. So it must be commercially viable and self-sustaining. We will give the building a new lease of life in its important area. We need to urgently raise funds now, because we've got the conservation plan, to get some traction going. And we need also at the same time to ensure the asset doesn't deteriorate while we're doing all these things. At the moment the asset's in good condition. Might talk about that shortly. The asset is in good, well anyway. What we're planning to do is run these sort of things if they're justified financially. Prison experience tours, a Galleries of Justice museum, upmarket courtyard restaurant, media and arts venue for shows. Nicholas McBride might come along and organise something. Overnight stay in a cell experience. Apartments for sale. There is space there which could make very nice apartments for sale or lease. So it could be meeting rooms for hire and other space for hire. For example, record storage. There's far too many cells in the place for us to use for prison experience tours. So some of those cells could well be turned into record storage, which means that the redevelopment has to have good access put in. The access is very, very poor at the moment. So that's one of the major things we've got to look at. Alerting. Just going back to the asset is not deteriorating. We've had to replace 12 slates just the other day, but By and large, it's in very good nick inside and very good nick on the outside. And we've got an income stream coming in from car parking, which is paying for the conservation plan and keeping the building in good nick. So I'm suggesting to you that now would be the time to set up this iconic building, especially seeing we've got the iconic building waiting there for you to plant your name on and put money into. So I'm recommending to the councillors that would they please give good consideration to setting up this iconic heritage fund. 2 million a year, I think you're talking about. I'll probably take the first 10 years, roughly. No, first 3 years maybe. And see how you go. That's about it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Questions? Councillor Wilson?
Sorry, I'm just taking from that last comment. Are you saying that you need about $6 million, or what money do you need?
I was going to touch on that, but I missed it. The largest funder for these sorts of things is the Lotteries Commission. But they require you to have 1/3 of the money for the project raised before they'll consider it. So you can break the project down into stages, which we plan to do. Overall, the feasibility study we did with Optra Associates a couple of years ago now suggested that we would, in the end, need perhaps 6 million. Certainly 2.5 million or thereabouts to start with, to get the thing rolling and earning some money. But depending on what we do inside the place, as far as, partitioning and turning into flats and all that sort of thing, that would depend on the amount of money we needed. But so it's somewhere between 2 and 6 million staged.
So, you've got charitable trust status?
Yes.
And you have taken in donations to date for this, or?
No, only the car park revenue and the tours.
Councillor Benson-Pope.
Thank you. Thank you, Stuart, for your work in this area and the other work that we see so often publicised. You said the building's not deteriorating much, so there's no water getting in, doing much damage or anything like that?
No.
What's the extent of the issues around earthquake or seismic strengthening? Are there any?
The feasibility study, Optra Associates had all their experts out and about and crawling over the place, and it's at 33 or whatever it is, 34% now, and we have allowed in those figures to raise it to 67% if we have to. It's built like it's built like a beehive. It's really strongly built. It's triple brick in places.
It has plenty of small internal partitions.
Yeah. In a stream. But yeah, it does. It may need to be upgraded once the change of use goes through. We might need to have a look at it. In fact, what we hope to do next with the money we raise to start with is to hire Optra Associates and all their associated experts to really focus on this and put the exact figures together and quantity surveys and so forth, and get some dollars attached to what we're trying to do and get us to stage 1 so we can then go and fund that, raise the funds. Raising the funds is going to be the hardest job for this project, I think.
Councillor Bazet.
Yeah, Mr Harvey, I presume the trust bought the building from the Crown or Ngāi Tahu?
Yes, Ngāi Tahu.
Yeah, Ngāi Tahu. Were you given any assurance of funding from Ngāi Tahu in the future?
No. I paid them huge dollars for the place, so they were heavy.
So you really just took it off their hands? You took the responsibility of maintaining the business of the building away from the previous owners?
Oh yes, we own the place lock, stock and barrel. There is no connection to Ngāi Tahu or the Corrections Department.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr Harvey, and I personally am very excited about this project, and now that the Chief Post Office is open for business again, I can fixate on this instead. I just wonder what, if any, support, financial or otherwise, you've had from the DCC up until this point.
The Heritage Fund helped out with some funding for the conservation plan. I think it was 10,000 if I recall. So yeah, the Heritage Fund's been good to us and good to me over the years. The rest of the money, that was to buy the building. That was to buy the building, 10,000. A lot of other funders came to the party there in small amounts, and even some private people put money into that. So everybody was quite keen to see us buy the thing, and now we're going to do something with it. But the DCC Heritage Fund has been good, and Glenn Hazelton's been fantastic to work with.
Councillor Noon.
Thanks, Your Worship. Good to see you again, Stuart.
Yeah, good to see you.
You mentioned about the car parking. Could you give me an idea? I'm not really familiar with the car parking space, but how much space is there? And why I ask the question is that we're grappling with this issue with cruise ship buses in the Octagon, and I just wondered, long term, is there any way that maybe it could serve some sort of purpose in that regard? But how much space is in that car park area?
I think we've got 23 car park spaces, and they're rented out full time. And the ones inside the fence are taken away at night, and the fence is locked. But the ones across the front are rented by the Justice Department. The Justice Department have been the biggest customer for car parks there. As far as having anything available for buses and stuff, the overall plan did call for maybe having room for buses to drop people off inside the building, inside the land area, so they could go in from Castle Street and come out what's called Dunbar Street now. So there's possibilities there, but there again the vacant land there lends itself to doing something else with it if we wanted to. I offered it to the Chinese people who were putting up the hotel, but I didn't think it was much good. That answer the question.
Councillor Wiley.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Harvey. What are you budgeting to, or would like from the DCC in funding?
2 million first year.
That was quick.
Thank you, Stuart.
Okay, then.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor, Common Councillors. I'm out of here.
Mr. Liddell. We'll take one more, councillors, Mr. Liddell's, and then we'll break briefly. We can carry on. Welcome, Jared.
Just a few comments in support of my submission and a few points there. I'd like to advocate for the spoke solution to the cycleway priority. In particular, as I outlined, the section from Vauxhall to Glenfalloch has a high traffic count. In fact, the detailed traffic counts show more like 5,000 there. The nature of the traffic is different. It involves more commuter traffic. Own personal experience of myself and many other people is that part is the one where you get more conflict with traffic. There's little pedestrian refuge. It's also commuter traffic, and it's necessary that people will drive to work on that section of the road. When it is not available to cycle, they'll have to drive out and then ride sometimes from the end. So for all these reasons, it's important to move on that first. Without that, we don't have an integrated plan. The Broad Bay section, Broad Bay itself is relatively all right. There's footpath refuge in that area itself. The section to Portobello, that's not so heavily walked by young children anyway. It's the area right around Broad Bay that's more heavily walked. There are some places for mitigation there. The Company Bay to Camp Bay section, there are very few walking that to Company Bay. There are also possibilities for mitigating particular pinch points on that Portobello section. So I'm saying we should move on it, but please move on Vauxhall first. Looking more widely, I looked at the link between North and South Dunedin, and I still think we should keep on the drawing boards the possibility of going down the Cumberland Street side rather than the Vogel Street. It could be an attractive green route, and it could link through with the railway overhead bridge to the South Dunedin area, provide very direct access there. It's also, if we're trying to get direct links, which and minimise the crossing of traffic, which at the moment would be involved on the Cumberland Street traffic crossing. If we go down the west side of the Wharf Street Portsmouth Drive section, that's an area that the council would put a link through to less problem with intersections. In South Dunedin, I support through links rather than quiet streets, although Richardson Street is quite well catered for, but the through links are most important. I made some points about a wider issue, and that is the Dunedin littoral and the amenity that we have got in this area. As considering that it could be of considerable and appreciating value, and we need some leadership, and that leadership should come from the council. This is not about any particular funding of money. In fact, it involves very little, but it does involve the council having this itemised in plans and making it clear in all the policies going forwards. So there are areas that have been particularly successful, like the Signal Hill mountain bike track involved a very minimal contribution from the council. And now there's a regular procession of young families and young children using that of great value. There are a number of tracks just outside that area where there are linkages that enable people to have the right to walk around the block. Now, as we move forward, we want to enable people to have more and more options for either pedestrian access or cycling. And there are a few links here which are actually paper roads or whatever notified. And the council should be more forward-looking and pencil those in, because they provide important opportunities both for ordinary everyday access, and they provide loops of connection which add to the value tremendously. The one in Waitati, I think, stands out. If you had a link from the Pigeon Flat at the top of the Leith Saddle over to Mount Cargill, it ties with Orokonui, and in view of Dunedin promoting itself, both in terms of publicity, it's almost a nil cost, but a great win and part of our presentation. There are other areas which conflict with the development policy. For instance, the gated suburb on Highcliffe blocks access. There should be a link through to Port Chalice, because at the moment we're creating blocks of land which are not surveyed for pedestrian access. As we move into a pedestrian world or cycling world, we want to make sure that we at least earmark these corridors. I talked about the coastal access, and here again the City Council should have these clearly in the plan. So there's a gap between Allen's Beach and Cape Saunders, more closely into town. There's the problem of the developments at St Clair Heights and possible walkways through to Tunnel Beach. These should be all mentioned because they're of great value to that immediate amenity of Dunedin, and really needs to go into the plan. Now, if we, I make a couple of other points to make. First of all, I strongly support the movement to more realistic, economically realistic development levies. The ones you propose are a very small token of what would economically be more preferable, but at least move in that direction. I made the point about supporting the weighbridge at the dump. I think that's the only efficient way to do that properly. Just like to commend the council to the good work it's done, and hope that you move towards making the stadium more multi-use. The more we can use that turf and artificial turf, the better, because it's idle too long. And other things you've done are very valuable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Liddell. Questions, councillors? Councillor McTavish.
Just trying to get my head around on the page where you talk about the Portsmouth Drive route, and you give this one here, you give 3 options. You're advocating for G, is that right, along Cumberland Street?
I think that's one that is well worth looking at. It would be a relatively attractive route and be free of traffic and give direct access from that warehouse centre right up into the middle of town, where you can link with the upper Dunedin walkways.
Yeah, okay.
The other one was from the stadium down to the station, where there's a corridor there that would be very attractive. And I think the council's now moving to put that on the books, but it needs to be there more clearly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Thank you, Mr. Liddell. Appreciate it. All right, councillors, we'll take a break and we'll be back at 15:15, I think, if that's okay. We'll have 10 minutes, then we'll be trucking again.